It's now live stream, fine, yeah. Okay, good morning everyone to today's Falkirk Council Scrutiny Committee External. Do we have any apologies?
I've got no apologies, Convener. I might add though that we are expecting the portfolio holder for public protection, Councillor Laura Murtagh, to join us, and she's just indicated that if she can be asked if she's wanting to ask any questions or contribute, she's happy to do that, but she's not particularly wanting to speak at any item.
Okay, thank you. Is there any declaration of interest? No, thank you. Minute of meeting held on the Thursday, 19th August 2021. We approve the minutes.
Approved.
Anything arising from the minutes? No, thank you. That takes us to agenda item 4. Performance Falkirk Council Area Local Police Commander is an updated report. Mr. Gibson, are you leading this one?
Good morning, Convener. I'm going to pass on to Craig Walker, Chief Inspector Craig Walker, in a second, Convener. But thank you for inviting Craig and I along this morning. We're delighted to come along and speak to the committee. Craig is a local area commander for Falkirk, is well versed on these issues and what they mean to Falkirk and the communities of Falkirk. So I'm going to ask Craig just to take us through the different issues. Convener, I don't know if it's to your liking, but my plan would be that we look at each item and then maybe pause and ask for questions from yourself or any of the members, if that would be acceptable.
It's acceptable. Mr. Gibson, thank you.
Thank you, Convener. If I can ask Craig maybe to come in at that point.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Convener. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to provide an update on the questions raised in May this year when I presented the Police Performance Report for Falkirk for the year 2020-2021. Following the meeting, questions were raised and were forwarded to me, and I've had the opportunity to look at these matters and prepare the report that is being considered today. I'm sure that everyone's had the opportunity to read the report and the appendices and the linked documents. The Divisional Commander's with me today and will provide a verbal update on the last section in relation to Conference of the Parties COP26, which seemed a distance away back in May, but is now just around the corner. Since I provided my original report, I've had the opportunity to meet with some of the elected members that are at the meeting today and correspond with others, and it's been really useful to me in understanding the concerns of the local communities and emerging issues. So I'll go through the report section by section. The first section at 2.1 was wildlife crime. And in terms of wildlife crime, I was asked to report about progress to reduce wildlife crime and to provide an introduction for Councillor McCluckie to the Police Wildlife Officer and the Rural Crime Officer. And that aspect of it's been done. I thought it would be useful to outline the roles of both the Wildlife Officer, PC Laura Robertson, and the Rural Crime Officer, PC Heather Campbell. And that's been done in the report. Both provide a valuable source of information and provide assistance to officers who encounter some of the more obscure crimes that they might never have had experience previously investigating. They also ensure that where incidents have been reported anywhere in the division, they're recorded properly and investigated properly. And we link in with other agencies and third sectors as appropriate. And one of the issues that we would normally have is that sometimes if it is a fairly obscure issue, that officers can be left wondering whether a crime's actually been committed, and having the experience of Laura Robertson and Heather Campbell there allows us to make sure that we capture all that we should be capturing and investigate it properly. I think it'd be fair to say that there's probably been a fair bit of underreporting in terms of particularly wildlife crime, because often it's not often recognised by everyone as a crime. It's often committed in open areas where there are no witnesses, limited CCTV opportunities, etc. So I've listed in the report there what we have recorded in terms of wildlife crime for 2019 and 20 and 2020-21. So they're not large numbers. 2 recorded in the year 1920, and in 2021 we had 15, which is a fairly large increase, albeit, as I say, the numbers are fairly small. The main offences in the Falkirk area were for freshwater offences, including fishing without permission and taking fish from reservoirs without permission. And all of those occurred at one area, the Avonbank Fishing Club in Pullman. There were 6 offences there. And the other offences are incidents where wildlife have been found injured in suspicious circumstances by the public and reported. This has included birds of prey, damaging nests of wild birds, shooting a duck with a crossbow, allowing a dog to kill deer, and unlawfully killing and taking deer. It's difficult to determine whether crime levels are rising or if members of the public have been accessing more remote areas in larger numbers or are being more observant, or potentially just a mixture of the two. In terms of detections, there have been 4 detections in the year 2021, which in itself demonstrates that the challenges faced when dealing with these types of crimes. I'll stop there, Convener, if anyone has any questions on wildlife crime.
Okay, I'll take questions. Anyone got a question? Councillor McCluskey.
Yes, Convener, I thank the police for being in touch. They gave me the details, and we're starting the season where we'll see quite an upbeat on this sort of thing that goes on that many people are unaware of. I believe there's a crossover between wildlife crime and rural crime, because certainly in the Braes area and the villages, if you go around in the dark nights, you see people lamping, some with dogs and others shooting, but certainly going through fields full of livestock and worrying the sheep getting near, at certain times of year when the lambs are imminent and that are a major concern. And if you drive coming back for public meetings and seeing sightings and that, it's quite clear you see the people lamping in my area. And I know some of the farmers are quite intimidated by some of the people who go and hunt the deer next to the forest. So I do know what's going on, and I hope that the 2 officers work closely together and we try to get the word out for people to contact them, give them their details and for confidentiality, and try to stop some of these barbaric things. I also know, because I used to keep pigeons, and when you deal with, when you go about with pigeon people, some people get frustrated that their best bird gets. It's different when they're lost, the birds of prey during coming home for the races are injured, but when they come and take them for the loft and then come back the next day again, and that, I know how frustrating it can be for your best birds, but some people out of frustration do break the law and poison or trap or kill these birds of prey. So it does go on, and as I say, I'm glad we've got officers responsible, but I do feel that we need to get the word out who the 2 officers are and start to gain confidence in the community, because we need the support of the community to catch these people. Thanks very much. That's what I'd like to say. But if any of them's on the call and wants to respond, I'm quite happy.
Okay, any other questions? Could I ask a quick question on the Avonbank fishing? Sorry, David, on you go. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Convener. I would also like to congratulate Falkirk Council Police for bringing in Laura Robertson and Heather Campbell. But like Councillor McCluskey, until I got this report, that was the first I'd heard of them. I'd like a wee bit of communication, because I wouldn't know who to get in touch with until I got this report. A question I'd like to ask Craig is, page 10 at the top, an area of concern recently has been livestock worrying. Not being a farmer, could you explain what livestock worrying means, please?
Certainly, I'll answer the first part first, if you don't mind. Whilst we've got 2 officers, the scale potentially of the amount of crime or issues that they deal with, they can't deal with everything themselves, but what we can have is, local officers can still deal with local incidents. But what they do have is that person they can go to that has the knowledge that they might need if it's something that they haven't dealt with before, which is really quite helpful. Now, they will take on some of the more obscure things, but generally it would be more direction and advice and guidance. So not all inquiries or investigations will sit with these 2 officers, but they can keep an overview of it, and it's to make sure that we have that consistency there, and that we're not closing off incidents or not dealing with anything in terms of criminality, or not referring to other agencies, or indeed referring to other agencies when it's not appropriate to do so. So it's trying to gain that consistency. In terms of worrying, that's more down to the dogs being off leads, is my understanding, and in fields where they might be running and chasing after livestock and either injuring them or the livestock injure themselves, have been in panic and getting themselves into trees and hedges and fences. And I think potentially a consequence just of, over the last year, increased use of our green spaces in our countryside.
Thank you, Craig. Thanks, Convener.
Councillor McCluskey.
Yes, you're right. It has been on the increase, the amount of dogs reported worrying sheep, and quite a number of farmers have to result in shooting the dogs, or because they do considerable damage to the lambs inside. They can be carrying 3 or 4 lambs, and that same lost as well, just with one sheep, but where they attack a flock, and you can see the damage on some sheep, and some sheep have to be put down for the worrying dogs. So it is a major concern, and one of the things that, once again, that we need to make, we like people to go and walk, but keep your dog on a leash if there's livestock available, and that seems to be a message, hopefully, that the council can maybe get involved with the police and try to get around there. And we've got people in schools now, obviously officers do great jobs, but start them young and learn them that the damage that their pet can do when you're not watching it, because you didn't believe it's ever your dog.
Any other questions? Sorry, Alan, on you go.
Thanks, Convener. Just to come in on the sheep worrying point there, yeah, as Craig is detailed there, and as Councillor has mentioned, the number of dog owners have increased significantly over the last 18 months. Some of you on the call here may have got a dog now that you never had before, because obviously we've all been confined to the shores of the UK. So what we are seeing is, with not making excuses for folk, but a certain amount of ignorance as to what your responsibilities as a dog owner are across the country. So there is some national campaigns about to be launched, both now and in the run up to the spring, again to Councillor McCluskey's point regarding lambs specifically, so that folk are well versed in what they should and shouldn't be doing. We've had an incident even in the last 4-6 weeks in Forth Valley where a farmer has shot a dog for the very reasons it's been described, where it's actually caused significant injury and distress to farm animals. So it is an important subject. Craig is more than happy to do something locally in the Falkirk area to raise awareness, but that will dovetail in hopefully really well with a national campaign, again to reinforce to folk the responsibilities that they have, particularly new dog owners. As I say, those of you who perhaps got a dog will know that, and those of you who maybe have got one in the last 18 months will know that too. So.
Thanks, Alan. Question I have is about the fishing and taking fish on reservoirs. Is the Avon Bank fishing area the only reservoir that are having these problems?
Convener, I don't know the answer to that. I think it probably is a fair bit of under-reporting in relation to this. It might just be Avon's Bank are particularly well up on the fact that it is a crime and they will report it to police. I suspect that there will be other instances of it. Either people don't believe it's a crime, or it's a police it's something for the police to investigate, or they don't bother reporting it. But I think there is probably a fair bit of under-reporting across all the spectrum of wildlife crime there. It's the only one that we've got reported and recorded as a crime.
Is there any deterrents being put in place, whether it be the police or by the fishing club itself, to prevent this happening in the future?
It's very difficult. I think education and some police activity. I think them reporting it is probably a good starting point. There's going to be some police activity and investigation, because the nature of these places are that they're quite open, and it's very difficult to stop, particularly out of hours. Members of the public just attending and using it, and probably relies very much on members either challenging people or reporting it to police. But I fully suspect there'll be a fair bit of challenging going on. But that just doesn't get reported to police.
Yeah, maybe I prefer that than going to a food bank, catching their own dinner. I don't know. Any other questions? Okay, Craig, you want to carry on?
Thank you. The 2.2 in the report, we've headed it as road safety, bike safety courses. So I was asked to present information regarding road safety guidance specifically related to bike safety, together with any information on bike safety courses. So looking into that, speed awareness courses are a key deliverable under the Scottish Government's road safety framework. We're considering their merits at present. In England and Wales, since 2004, and all forces in England and Wales now have diversionary courses as an opportunity for diversion from prosecution. Police Scotland have been working with a range of partners, including Transport Scotland and the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, as well as Safety Camera Scotland, to look at the potential implementation of speed awareness schemes. Police of Scotland, with approval from the Lord Advocate, has been looking at the impact of the potential introduction of speed awareness courses, and work on that is continuing. There are significant legal and procedural differences, however, between Scotland and England and Wales, and the complexities of introducing these types of courses are significant. I've outlined a number of organisations and charities in the report which provide information and practical courses to improve skills and safety in this area, and one of the best known, Bike Safe, is a police-run motorcycle initiative in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. There are no plans at present to reintroduce this into Scotland due to its intensive structure. But my understanding, looking at what's available from other areas, is that in the Central Belt there are other options there other than the police providing these courses, which are accessible to those who want to access it. And I'll stop there, Convener.
Any questions? Yes, Councillor Balfour.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yeah, the Bike Safe, I've brought this up for many years. They used to do Bike Safe course in Scotland several years ago.
Councillor Balfour, we lost you.
You hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there was Bike Safe course in Scotland a while ago, but it was just the one part where you went out with an officer, and they assessed your riding skills and gave you some guidance and information on how to stay safe, especially. Down in England at the time, I think they did a two-part course where there was also a classroom session, which would have been very helpful up here as well. I'm very disappointed that they're not going to be reintroducing that in Scotland. There is quite a lot of motorcycle accidents, especially in the good weather when the bikers are out. There's a lot of bikers now, when they maybe had a bike when they've been young, and then they've left it for years, and then later on when they're older, they've got a bit of spare cash about, and then they get a bike again. And that's a kind of factor as well. Older bikers that haven't been on bikes for many years. So it's quite disappointing that that's not being brought back in. I've got a wee question about or a couple of questions about the speed awareness course. The first one is if you can give us a bit more on the complexities, and also if and when that actually comes in, is there a way of a retrospective, of doing that retrospectively for people that have already got points on their active points on their license?
Councillor, I'm not able to give you a full update on that, but it's certainly one that I'll go back to where I got the original information from and seek that information on those 2 points and come back to you on that, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's me. Thanks, Convener.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor McCluskey.
Aye, in relation to motorbikes, I have seen an increased use, and I do know that these clubs can go way up up north and into the quieter roads and meet, and it is kind of growing. So it's good if we're going to be linking and liaising and trying to get them to do that, because some of the roads they're on are single roads. When that one, as far as cycles, obviously we're mentioned down now on page 11. We've also mentioned cycling, and obviously that's another thing that's on the increase. And I do see frustration sometimes for some drivers when cyclists are going along the road, but it does promote health and sport and well-being, and as I say, is encouraged. In fact, the last 2 weekends there was 2 events in my village, come from Glasgow to Slamanan, and they done a men's cycle race 2 weeks ago, and then a ladies race last week, and they had outriders, they had cars in front. Everything was safe, the ambulance folk and following them round, and it was a great event. There was 2 members of the public complained, but all the rest of the village was delighted and hope to come back next year. I also see an initiative up in Brighton's, up at the cricket ground there, where you can take your bike in free, and they sort it for you for your breaks and these things. And I think that should be better advertised as well. So a wee relation of mine broke 2 her bones in her arm falling off the bike the other week there, because she went on her brother's bike with no brakes, and that shows you. But there is a big increase on the roads. They come from Stirling, they come from Linlithgow, they come round the rural roads, and I know that we are asking the council to look at putting cycle safe routes or signs up to be wary of cyclists and things like that. Apparently they do it in Fife. I wonder if the police could inform me if there's any knowledge of that, how it seems to work over in the Fife area. But they seem to have these cycle kind of signs up over there. And obviously we're here to protect our constituents, and as is the police, and I'm just looking for a bit of information on that. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Gibbon.
Thanks, convener. So I'll come back to your points, Councillor McCluckie. In terms of Fife, I don't have any personal knowledge of that, to be fair. I'm a pedal cyclist, like probably many on the call, so I'll definitely have a look at that, Craig, and I'll go away and have a look and see what our Fife colleagues are doing, whether it's maybe Fife Council or Fife Police, I'm not sure. But we'll certainly look at that. There are some things that are ongoing. I mean, you're right, the amount of people on pedal bikes has exploded again. It's a bit like dogs. Those that didn't buy a dog have bought a bike. You know, and we've had some tragedies in Forth Valley, to be honest. We've had 2 older people who've died in pedal bike accidents in the last 18 months on our roads, both in the Stirling area, I have to say. But we have got some initiatives that have been ongoing, which many of you have maybe seen, particularly on social media. So Operation Close Pass has been ongoing. So our road policing colleagues who are based at Stirling have been across Falkirk, Stirling and Clackmannanshire, encouraging and challenging drivers who basically don't give cyclists enough space on the roads, because obviously there are some people who just pass way too close and are introducing a whole level of danger, which is not acceptable. So our road policing colleagues are continue to do that, and obviously we'll continue to do that into the spring of next year and beyond. I suppose the other points is there was an initiative that was used down south so that pedal cyclists could upload footage. Some of you may or may not be aware of that, but a lot of cyclists now and other motorists as well use kind of dash cam footage, and you can now get such footage for helmets for both motorbikes and pedal cyclists. We now have an ability in Police Scotland to receive that footage, which we never had before. So remember, the public can say, you know, can report an incident whereby they've been put in danger potentially by a potentially a vehicle on the road, and they can upload that footage, which is very powerful and allows us to act upon it, because it invariably has registration numbers and that sort of stuff. So there are some really strong and positive things that are ongoing to try and improve road safety, because actually any injury on the road is one too many, never mind a serious injury or a death. So again, anything that anybody has in terms of initiatives for Falkirk, again, we're happy to look at them. The schools do a great job. I know certainly my kids who are in a Stirling Council school have bikeability courses, and I'm sure that's rolled out across Forth Valley. I would imagine, and again, I'm looking to my Falkirk Council colleagues for confirmation of that, or indeed Craig. But again, all these different measures by a range of different agencies go together to make our roads hopefully a little bit safer. And again, some of it is very much about educating drivers to do the right thing in terms of both pedal cyclists, but also to Councillor Balfour's point about motorbikes. I share his disappointment regarding not uptaking the motorbike element to that. Very resource intensive. And again, we'll look at that and see if there's anything we can do locally. But I'd imagine if we're not going to do it nationally, it'd be very difficult to implement something locally. But that doesn't mean we won't have a look at it. And if we can do it, we certainly will do it. So hopefully that gives some people some background as to what's going on proactively to try and make our roads safer.
Thank you.
Councillor Balfour, you want to know again, and Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, convener. Just on the cyclist thing, when I used to go on my push bike when I was a lad, we did some training at the school, as it still do in places. We were always kind of taught to stay into the left on the road so that vehicles had room to pass you, etc. But I've seen quite a bit of when cyclists are out in groups, there's maybe 3 or 4 across on the lane, right out to the white line, the middle white line. And that then means that vehicles don't have enough room to pass them if it's a kind of narrow road, because you obviously want to leave a bit of space so they're not going to get knocked off or blown off the wind or whatever else. So how can we sort of improve the cyclist knowledge to stay in a bit and have a bit of sort of give and take with cars as well?
So convener, I'll come back in on that one if that's okay.
Sorry, Alan, that was exactly going to be my question as well. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one. I mean, and Craig, you may have more knowledge on this than me, but certainly some of it's born about cyclists want and wish to remain safe. So actually being a bigger presence on the road helps them to be more safe. And if you speak to cycling groups, as I have done, I don't know if Craig has, that is invariably why they do that. That said, I absolutely understand and appreciate both councillors' points regarding the frustration that causes drivers, because then they have to perform fairly significant manoeuvres to get by what is a slow-moving body of cyclists. So I'm not entirely sure there's a golden nugget, there's an answer there, but obviously trying to promote, as we do usually more online and in person when we can, that ability to respect each other's rights on the road. Because again, the pedal cyclists have every right to be there as much as the vehicle, but it's making sure that neither puts either in danger. And again, the cyclists potentially could put a car in danger if a car does a manoeuvre which is potentially something that they shouldn't be doing at that particular time. But I don't have an answer to that one as to how we do it. I think education, as Craig has mentioned earlier on, is the best possible way of doing that, getting people to show a bit of mutual respect and a bit of patience. But again, that can be difficult. We've all seen people on the road whose driving behaviour is not great, to be honest. I'm sure we all have had times where we've maybe said the odd word regarding a driver who's acted in an inappropriate way in front of us, or indeed a cyclist, just under our breath, I hope. But again, education appears to be the most appropriate way. In terms of social media, it's one of the things I see the most debate about in social media. When we put something on about cycling on there, there's definitely a body of people who support driver behaviour and definitely a body of people who support cyclist behaviour, and there is quite a lot of antagonism between both. I don't know if anyone else has witnessed that, but I certainly see that frustration boiling out in social media commentary. So, Craig, I don't know if you've anything you want to add that would maybe add more value than my comments.
All I would say is I'm also a cyclist, and I think there's a responsibility from both sets of parties. And I find when I'm out, there's times I will go two abreast because I believe it's safer, and there's times clearly when the road conditions are such, or you know the backlog behind you, that you move into single file. So it's a bit of both, and I think it's just that knowledge that you go out there that it's not just I'll cycle one way and that's it. You're asking for cars to be responsible on the road, so equally we need the cyclists to take that level of responsibility as well and look at the road conditions, the type of road, and then make the right decision as to how they're going to cycle. But yeah, I've been involved in a few incidents with cyclists and cars that have then gone onto social media, and when you see the amount of information that comes in, it's generally a two-way conversation of people supporting it and people not supporting it, and it's going to be very difficult, I suppose, to get to a point where everybody was happy, unless everybody got to the point where they were using the roads responsibly, which is going to be quite difficult to do given human nature.
I don't think two abreast is a major issue, as long as the cyclists have got enough room between each other and there's plenty of room for vehicles to get past. I mean, considering as well, there may be like an HGV coming the other way on like a rural road as well, a lot of wind there. So, but I mean, I've seen them. I've actually been stuck in queues on back roads coming home from work and stuff. I've seen them like 4 abreast right out to the middle line, and it's not just for a few hundred yards or whatever till you can safely get past. It's for miles and miles, and they just sit there and they make a point of not letting the cars past. I mean, if you've got a caravan, you're supposed to pull in every now and again to let any back up get past you. But it's just some cyclists. Most cyclists are perfectly fine, and they do have a bit of consideration for other road users. But there's a few out there that are are sort of giving a bad name to cyclists. And they are causing problems, and they're going to end up causing an accident.
So it's Craig, I know the roads you're talking about, and I think those types of roads out to the white line isn't acceptable, because you're then inviting motorists to pass you, and they can't give you the amount of passing space that the cyclists are demanding at other times. So it's back to that responsibility. That type of road that you mentioned there, just for my mind, wouldn't be suitable to cycle like that unless it's a closed road event or there's other measures in place.
Okay, thanks for that. It's some maybe you can keep an eye on and see if we can do some about that, just to increase the safety a wee bit, because it is going to end up causing an accident, I think.
Any other questions? I have a quick one, Craig, and you may know the answer to this one. Is in the Biker Down first aid course. It's provided with Scottish Fire and Rescue. I just wondered if you had any figures in the uptake of the course. It was a popular course. Or...
I don't have, but I've got links into the fire service, so I can probably try and find that information if you'd find it useful.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Hey, Craig, you want to move on?
Certainly, thank you, Convener. That takes me to section 2.3 in the report, which is about mobile working, and I was asked to report on feedback and measures of success of the implementation of the new smart devices. I think we spoke about it quite a lot at the last meeting that we had. So I've put some information there. So the introduction of the mobile devices for Police Scotland's frontline officers has an impact on safety, well-being, public confidence. Independent academic research has certainly shown that to be the case. And there's a link in the report to that, which is a fairly lengthy report, but it is a good read. Within Forth Valley, all frontline uniformed officers now use a mobile device in replacement for their traditional notebook. Although it's more than just a notebook, it offers a range of additional benefits, which allows them to spend more time in the community. In early 2022, this will be rolled out to CID officers in Forth Valley, and is a significant investment in terms of finance and time. And some of the uniformed colleagues here who have been using it and experiencing it will be assisting in rolling that out with other colleagues in CID. Academic research was commissioned by Police Scotland and supported by the technology partner Motorola Solutions. Also found that mobile working has enhanced proactive policing, increased visibility and boosted morale. It was carried out by Abertay and Robert Gordon universities over a 14-month period, and they interviewed 68 officers across 5 divisions, as well as analysis and carrying out observations on how they were getting used. And I've listed the themes that the researchers were looking at there. Officers reported the technology positively impacted on their well-being, as they were able to be more efficient when on duty and didn't have to spend as much time at the end of their shift completing paperwork. Officers felt they were being invested in by given pieces of kit that's positively changing the way that they work. The benefits have been particularly noticeable during the pandemic, where officers can be briefed remotely and conduct tasks without having to return to police premises to do so. The link to the mobile working benefits working paper allows a fuller in-depth knowledge of the full scale of the review that was carried out, and provides that reassurance in relation to our own benefits analysis that we carried out. And as an officer who started my career using only a pen and some paper and sometimes some carbon paper, it represents a real sea change in development and use of technology, which suits the modern police officer and how they want to obtain and exchange information, and also suits the way the public, we believe, want to interact with our officers as well. In my view, it's been one of the most single effective pieces of equipment delivered to police officers, certainly in my time in the police, and really still has that potential to be developed further. I'll stop there, Convener.
Okay. Any questions? Could I ask a quick question then? Obviously, it's a very positive feedback you've given on the use of the mobile working, and you've also said it's an expensive exercise. So can you tell me what kind of lifespan of these devices, and is there a program to replace them ongoing?
Convener, I'm probably going to just make this one up, but I think I'm quite safe in saying so. With any piece of technology, there will be a lifespan. I mean, these are really kind of commercially available devices that could be used as a mobile phone or a notebook, and developed to be used by the police. So no doubt there will be a process for updating these and replacement in time. But we really need to make sure that we get the full benefits from that investment before we upgrade. Because of the nature of technology and how fast it changes, in 3 to 4 years, who knows what technology might be available. So how and when and what we move to later on is probably still to be determined.
Okay, thank you for that, Craig. Okay, want to move on?
Certainly, thank you. That moves me on to section 2.4, which was the user experience survey. And what we were asked for was feedback, a better understanding of the methodology used in the public satisfaction survey. There was some concerns as well over a dip in certain months last time, which we kind of explained as being a bit of a blip, and that we would keep an eye on it in the current period. So in January 2020, it was a redesigned and refreshed approach to understanding the public's experience with Police Scotland's services was launched. The monthly surveys, previously known as user satisfaction surveys, are conducted by an external agency, Progressive Partnerships Limited. And every month they take a random sample of people who have contacted Police Scotland to report an incident or a crime, and they're contacted via text message to share their opinion about the service they've received. It's about 1,500 individuals every month. Shared with Progressive Partnerships Limited. And for C Division, this amounts to about 100 people randomly taken for each monthly sample, and every person has the opportunity to leave their comments about their experience. Prior to May 2020, participants took part in a telephone survey, which was conducted over the phone by a researcher from Progressive, and this has now been replaced with the online survey. User experience survey was designed and implemented in January 2020. So although we can compare data between months and years from this point, unfortunately the data prior to that date is not comparable. Appendix 1 in the report that is tabled today gives the most up-to-date performance on data that's currently available to us. The concerns I've mentioned at the last meeting were around about questions 4, 6 and 7, where we felt there was a bit of a blip that we would monitor. Other factors which may impact on this is the size of the sample that's used, which in terms of 100 people for Forth Valley is fairly small. So potentially looking at a force value is maybe more useful at some occasions than looking particularly at Forth Valley, albeit if that was replicated month after month, then clearly there would be an area of concern that would have to be looked at. And I'm pleased to say, looking at the figures which I've produced from the start of the financial year, there appears to have been some recovery in these key areas, and that we mirror in terms of Forth Valley against the force average in most of the areas mentioned there. And I'll stop there, Convener, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Any questions? Councillor McCluskey.
Yes, I listened carefully to your answers there, and I'm a bit disturbed that it's an outside agency that's doing the figures. I just thought maybe we had a different way of counting them, because clearly in the 7 or 8 different categories there, we are all either equal or below the rest of the force. C Division is well behind in a number of sectors, and it's right across the board over a 6-month period. So I think we've got to be concerned about that. You may be right about it just be bad luck, the sample, over it, but as they're taking each month, it's quite bad to look at. I would say, if you were a politician, you'd be making out that there was it was a different system the other group was using or something like that to make it sound better, as us politicians do. But as I said, I'm a bit disappointed, to be honest. And if we're a football team and we're looking at that, you'd be just on paper. Now I know the volume work that the officers do, as I say, but the public perception does seem quite low. The new, only yesterday I was dealing with a people said they weren't getting an update. One of the things is you can tell how things is happening, and the folk were saying they weren't, but I'm obviously I'm happy enough that the officers have said that there have been emails, updates of the crime, you know, in progress. So at the end of the day, I accept what the police are saying, but obviously the public perception is that we're still not doing enough to as a police force. So I would like to hear from them what we do we expect that over the next few months, what we're doing to change the trend and to trying to get us up to the national average or better. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you, Councillor. I think when we're dealing with a sample of 100, as I said, it probably doesn't take many within that 100 to skew it in terms of the force average. And looking back at the questions I mentioned there, we were well below force average back in March, which seems to have, when we look at it, not be replicated moving into from April to July. But I do take your point there that, you know, in terms of a few of the areas, we're a few points behind the force average. Maybe particularly in question 5, we're 7 percentage points behind there. What I would say is there's some aspects of that probably aren't particularly sat within the boundaries of Forth Valley when it comes to that first point of contact, which may sit with some of our colleagues in our contact centres, which should be then replicated across the force, because that call or that contact with police is getting dealt with at a national level. But clearly, when it comes to Forth Valley and an inquiry or an investigation in terms of keeping a complainant updated, it's something that I look at on a daily basis as an area commander. And certainly when we have our crime reports under investigation, there's actions put on for a 7-day update, and then regular updates to the point that an investigation is complete. And that's not to say I've not been involved here, or I have been involved in times where we've let ourselves down in terms of that. But that's down to me and down to supervisors and my own colleagues across the division to make sure that we check in with our officers who have a number of demands on any given day. But I know from being a customer myself and in other areas, there's nothing more frustrating about not getting information, not having a phone call returned, and not being kept up to date, no matter whether it's police or any other organisation you're dealing with. So I do accept there's room for improvement. I think it's down to potentially at this end robust local management, which falls to me in the Falkirk area.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but question 1, we went down for in May 77%, 62, 56. You know, massive drops. I mean, it's 13 points I think the force total. And I know I'll be going in further into the contact thing in a later question, but you know, I'm just seeing that it does looks bad, and I know that you study figures, and I'm sure that you'll be putting something in place. But I take it that it's the same percentage of people that other divisions use.
I think what it is, it's probably down to size of division. So, you know, retrospective to the size of the amount of people that are accessing services in that division. So C division out of that total is 100. My own take on it in terms of statistics is that 100 could be flawed, depending on that sample which has been taken randomly. Now, I'm fairly happy that the service that we're providing on most of the occasions within Forth Valley is a high service. It does concern me with C56%. You're looking at about half the people there, so that would be just over 50 people that they weren't particularly satisfied. So I do take your point that is a concern, and certainly one that as we see these figures month to month, we will monitor, and it certainly falls below the force total. So I do accept that.
I know the community's version. My last point is the community's great work's done with the community council meetings where they update the community council, that puts it in the Facebook, the work that the officers are doing in the ward, and I think that's instrumental. And during COVID, a lot of the community councils have been shut down for a year, or just a couple of individuals working in Zoom. But they're starting up again. So I hope that obviously when that happens and people get a better awareness how effective these are in dealing with issues, that it comes back to improve the situation. Now, I hope that helps. But so I encourage you to be involved with all the different groups in the communities. Thank you.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions?
Yeah.
Councillor Grant,
Yeah, Jim.
Councillor Grant and Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, convener. Craig, just a quick one. Prior to May 2020, when Progressive used to carry out telephone surveys, but then the Scottish Government guidelines, they had to follow and their offices closed. Now that we're getting kind of back to some form of normality, do you know, Craig, if we'll be going back to the telephone surveys? Because as you know, not everybody's comfortable with the technology that we've got. If you could answer that, please. Thanks.
Councillor, I don't know, but I'll certainly ask that question and I'll come back to you on that one.
Thank you. Thanks, convener.
Richardson answer the phone, I think. Any other questions?
Convener, it's Alan here. I was just going to come in,
Yeah.
if that's okay.
Yep.
Really good points raised by Councillor McCluskey and colleagues there. I probably just want to again reinforce Craig's point, which is we look at our compliance, if that's the right expression, every single day. So Craig on my behalf does that and looks at every incident, every crime. And there will be occasions when we haven't made contact as timelessly as we should have done. The officers, as you might imagine, each individual in our division carries a hefty workload. And it's been significant in the last 18 months, as many of you know, because I've written to all of you on the call and given you an indication as to sort of the workload that we've had to carry, and that hasn't went down in any shape or form. In fact, it goes up month by month, and some of the challenges that officers have to try and get through that and keep folk updated. And absolutely, folk have a right and an expectation to be updated. So there's absolutely your points, Councillor McCluskey, are well made. We need to look at these figures and take what we can from them. I am minded to Craig's point, though, that 100 people, I've got there'll be 100 incidents sitting on our screens right now for calls to service today, at least. So we'll deal with way more than 100 people a day just who call us and ask for some sort of support. So we just need to be mindful. I think that it is a moment in time. But that said, all this is good reflection for us, because we need to sit back and learn and do more in terms of how can we provide a better service, because at the end of the day we're all in the same game of trying to keep the public and our communities safe. So
Thanks, Alan. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Councillor Grant had asked the question I was going to ask as well. I think I'd highlighted this back 6 months ago when we last had this discussion. Because I think if we're not going back to telephone surveys and things, I think we're alienating certain categories of people, particularly elderly or those that are less well off who can't afford online stuff and things. So I think telephone surveys would be a better option. But yeah, Councillor Grant had asked the same question.
Thanks, Councillor Richardson. Any other questions? No.
Convener, if it's the will of the group that's the wish, Craig and I can put that forward. That it's your feedback that we'd wish to return to that. It may well be that is the plan, but if that is the will of the group, we'll certainly make that known.
That's all those welcomed. Okay, Craig, want to move on?
Thank you, Convener. Moves us on to section 2.5 in the report, which was the Police Scotland service centres. And the question that we were asked was to report on the contact centre performance information. So we've included some general information around call centre performance for the first quarter of the current year. Rather than going back into last year, I thought we'd make this more current. And whilst there's been a small increase in overall calls to police in the first quarter, which is 0.3%, the increase in 999 calls has been 22.9%, with a decrease in the 101 calls. The increase in 999 calls is significant, given the requirement to answer these calls within a very short time frame, and that the persons using this service are generally looking and needing a very quick response. Performance for these calls has improved, with the average call time reducing from 7 to 6 seconds, despite the increase in volume over this period. In the same period, the average call answer time for 101 calls has increased by 1 minute and 28 seconds, up to 3 minutes and 25 seconds. To provide some context around this, Police Scotland receives around 3.4 million contacts annually, we need to prioritise answering certain types of calls, with the highest priority being given clearly to 999 calls from the public, followed by calls from partner emergency services. The police call centres have continued to operate through necessity during the pandemic, with staff physically being present at work, which has resulted in a number of COVID absences and challenges and associated staff isolations. Staff have continued to attend their work during this period in very challenging circumstances. And during periods, some callers to 101 have clearly had to wait longer. There's a number of reasons for this, and I'll include some of them, which is the requirement that we've had to gain additional health and safety information for the safety of the public and responders. And this allows officers to attend with the correct levels of PPE, for example, and this can lead to an increased call duration time. Our contact assessment model, which I'm sure you'll all be aware of, has increased the length of calls as well, whilst we make an enhanced assessment to ensure that calls are resolved in the most appropriate way. Whilst this has a positive impact on local policing, with a high percentage of calls resolved within the contact centre, it clearly adds to time that these calls need to be resolved. And resourcing challenges due to social distancing and reduced ability to redeploy staff to call centres from other areas has also had an impact over this period of time. There's also been an increase in call volume due to specific events, of which there have been a few over the last year or so. Changes in COVID restrictions relating to members of the public seeking information and clarification. And we find that over a quarter of people using 101 are looking for information which can be sourced elsewhere. So to help assist persons calling 101, there are options presented to callers when they phone, if there's a more appropriate way that they can have their inquiry dealt with. And an example of that is contact us. It's there. But it's certainly been a challenging time for our contact centres, and I'm aware that some of our elected members as well have expressed to me at other times some concerns over their ability to contact police, particularly using the 101 service over the last few months. So, Convener, I'll pause there if that's okay.
Hey, Craig, thank you. Any questions? Councillor McCluskey.
And again, but on this one, I know I've listened carefully to what you said, and you've tried to explain, the reasoning for some of the figures, but clearly it's about 50% onto the call for the 101 calls increase. The number of calls have decreased, and yet it's taken another 50% time to get through. And normally if there are less calls, you would think that would speed things up. But that is a significant figure, 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes to average to get through. That means that there's a lot of people well over that figure. So this is worrying. I do know the amount of calls you get, and that, once again, I'll go back to the community councils. One was just going to publicise one, and they were amazed at the number of calls, even in a small village. That there are over a month how many calls that officers get, and the varied type of calls that come in and you deal with. So as I say, maybe it's a case of awareness, but certainly I think this has got to be looked at further. Clearly, if you're swiddling whether it's a 999 or a 101, and you've tried 101 and you're not getting through, my worry is that more people says, dash it, I'll just phone 999 and get through in 6 seconds, I mean, if somebody's breaking into your house or breaking into your car, to wait that amount of time, I understand what you're saying about some more information got to be given you. That causes frustration everywhere. I know that with the doctor's surgery. You phone the doctor's surgery and you're first in the queue and they tell you, if you've got a problem with your eyes, go to an optician, and if you've got a problem with your teeth, go to a dentist before you go through. Well, you wouldn't be phoning the doctor if you had a problem with your teeth, you know what I mean? So people are aware of that. So, but it just seems to take lengthy calls. So I do hope there's a way of improving this, or in the future. My answer would be, would you put extra people on? You said that you have been very busy. And my worry is there's nothing here about has there been a decline in staff taking the calls? Maybe over the COVID period, had you officers off and this was resulting in it? That would have been a good explanation, but there's nothing in here about that. So that's a thing that worries me. And maybe you could expand a wee bit on it.
Alan, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, convener, if I can, please. We could
Absolutely.
spend a few hours talking about this. To be frank, it's a really complex area of the business. But Mr. McCluskey, Councillor McCluskey, you raised a number of good points. I suppose to give you some illustration, we are the service of last resort. When people don't know who else to call, they generally call the police. So we've been taking calls the last 18 months about COVID-19 regulations, as Craig has said, pharmacy opening times, emergency plumbers, and the list goes on. I've spoken to the head of communications at length on a number of occasions about this, and we'll never turn anybody away because invariably people come looking for help and assistance. Is the call answering times detailed in the report acceptable? No, it's not. The Chief Constable himself at the recent SPA board said that. We want to do better, and we will do better, and we are doing better. We went through a really challenging time. As Craig's described, we're one of the only contact centres in Scotland that remained open right through the heart of COVID. When other contact centres closed, we had to maintain a service to the public, and understandably so. So our staff turned up in numbers to do work. To your point regarding absence, yes, our whole organisation, like every part of society, suffered significant absence. At one point, I had 118 officers missing from Forth Valley because of COVID-19, which is eye-watering in terms of my job. It gave me sleepless nights. Thankfully, we're in a very different place now, and we've come back out of that. And as one of you have mentioned, we're back into more of a normal rhythm and routine. That said, to your other point, Councillor McCluskey, about call volumes, the number is down in terms of 101, but what it doesn't illustrate is spikes. And I'll give you an example. About 8 weeks ago, a Tuesday, 8 weeks ago, we had 10,000 calls on a Tuesday. We experienced 10,000 calls on Hogmanay. That's the sort of spikes that we saw at various points during COVID-19. Now, any organisation is going to struggle to deal with that number of calls and still maintain the call answering time. And again, to give you a bit of an insight, we're limited because of social distancing space that the government insists upon, and we're limited about how many people we can physically put in a call centre. So again, we have to go by the rules, both to protect our staff, but also to make sure we don't fall foul of the guidance and legislation. So we did put extra staff in up and down the country at our call centres to mitigate some of that, and again to make sure that again, to Craig's point, 999 calls were never detrimented. So 101 did feel a hit, but 999 calls were never detrimented. So nobody was ever left waiting beyond reasonable times, as is detailed in the report there, to answer a 999 call. I suppose to give you some comfort, if it does give you comfort, when this is all gone, whenever that may be in the future, I would invite the group to come to the call centre at Bilston Glen. We have a number of them. There's one in Govan and one at Bilston Glen. I don't know if you've been before, but Craig and I will happily host a visit there, where I think it would be really valuable for you as a scrutiny committee to see how that operates and to see how our highly trained, highly capable staff work through the challenges of what I've just described there, because it's a really high pressure, high impact environment, but actually the men and women in there do a phenomenal job. And what they do, they quickly get the jobs to us at the front end of the organisation to make sure police officers are responding appropriately to the right calls, and that the communities of Falkirk and other parts of Scotland are well served in that regard. So sorry for the long-winded response, but hopefully I've given you a bit of an insight as to call handling and how it operates. Really challenging over the last 18 months, but we're now, to your point, Councillor, we're definitely in a position where we're seeing an improvement now. The call handling times are coming down in terms of 101, and hopefully back into more of an even keel. Hopefully that helps.
That fully helpful, an excellent response. And what I was trying to lead to was that, a wee bit about that, about the, user out in the front line and your officers are at risk catching COVID and try to keep public safe. You do an excellent job. But as I say, we're here to scrutinise the papers and ask the questions. And if a bit had been in about that, we wouldn't have asked that question. But well, thanks to you for the work that you do.
You would have, John.
I would have found something else.
Don't kid us on. Thanks, Alan. Thanks for the invitation to the call centre. I think I'll be welcomed when the opportunity arises. Councillor Richardson, do you have a question?
Yeah, that could be that. Yeah. I'm not very sure if Alan or Craig will be able to answer this, but it's in relation to the average call times for the 999. Now, I've not had cause to phone 999 for the police, but I have had many occasions for an ambulance over the last few months. And yes, the calls are answered within a very short period of time, but then you're put in a queue with the ambulance service, and you can wait for 2, 3, 4 minutes before you're actually physically put through to speak to somebody. Would that, to your knowledge, is that what happens with the police? Or are you straight through after your 7 seconds?
Yeah,
Convener, I'll answer that one if it's okay.
Okay.
So, Councillor, I'm not an expert in that, but what I do know is, obviously, BT, I can't speak for the ambulance service, but BT, when they take a 999 call, and some of you may have knowledge of this, but BT, when they take a 999 call, will send it to us at Police Scotland. If for any reason we can't pick it up in the prescribed time, it will go to another police service to pick up. That invariably doesn't happen because we're a big outfit and we have large call centres. We invariably pick up our own 999 calls in the times that you've seen detailed in the report. So smaller policing organisations and potentially the ambulance service, if they don't have a pickup within a certain period of time, it will bounce on to a different ambulance service to pick up and answer. But I don't, again, I'm straight into an area I don't know a huge amount about. But from a policing perspective, we have a fallback system in place so that the call is picked up very promptly as per the report there. So I don't know if that helps at all, but ambulance service, we need to do some digging on that one, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's just a know of experience that, it was answered within a few seconds, but then you're putting a call and somebody keeps coming back to you periodically saying, please hang on, we'll get to you as soon as possible. It's obviously just the wee lassie on the phone before she can connect you to somebody. I'm just wondering if it was the same. That's fine, thank you.
Craig?
So certainly my understanding is, when you get through, it's a person you're speaking to, so it's not an automated system. So you've already got somebody dealing with that inquiry, because immediately they're looking for information to decide where it should be directed and what the priority of that call should be. Because sometimes it's a call that shouldn't have come through in the 999 system, and they'll quickly identify that. So certainly my understanding is, and if I'm wrong, I'll certainly put my hands up to it. But it's certainly as a person you get through, I have phoned 999 myself. And it was always answered by an individual who can then very quickly determine what the nature of your call is.
Craig, yes, as an individual you speak to, but you still get put in a queue afterwards, yeah. That's fine, thank you.
Okay. I have a quick question on the 101 calls. Well, I mean, I can say that spoke to me, said they'd phone 101 and it just rang out. And I would have thought that every call, like Council H's and particularly 101, not so much 999, would be answered and you'd be in a queue. In this instance, they said they'd phone 101 and it just rang out and they gave up. And I thought maybe the system operated, you'd dial 101 and you're connected. And because there's quite a few businesses that operate that way, you're in a queue, and I just wonder if the same thing happened with 101. Why you would it would just ring out.
My understanding, Convener, is that you do get through, but I'll ask the question. I don't think just being held on a number that's continually ringing is a particularly effective service, but I'll ask the question. My understanding was you would go through at least to be told
I thought as well.
You were in the queue.
Yeah. Any other questions on that particular agenda item? No. Okay, Craig, you want to move on? You're on mute, Craig, I think.
Sorry, Convener, I don't think you got any of that at all. Okay, let's start again. 2.6 is driving licence offences, and it's a confirmation of what constituted driving licence offences, and there was particular interest in the percentage in relation to outdated licences. I think this came from the potential that persons were falling foul of not being able to get their licences updated, whether it be the photo card or the licence itself being out of date. So there's a number of offences which can make up this category. I've just included a few. Driving without a licence, driving underage, failing to produce, provide a licence, obtain a licence whilst disqualified, and your duty to provide or produce a licence in certain circumstances. So there's a number of offences come under that. In terms of the statistics that we provided back in May, they showed the rise to 156 between 2021, and that was from 126 in 19 and 20, which I think raised the question there. So I've looked at it, and within those numbers, those driving without a licence or underage amounted to 150 of the 156 in the year 2020-21, which hopefully takes away some of the concerns around the types of offences committed during that period. I've also highlighted in the survey there was a retrospective 11-month extension to the validity period of a photocard driving licence and the entitlement validity period for any licence which expired, and that was between February and the 31st of December 2020. So as such, with the numbers that are left there, I would expect the numbers of persons that have maybe fallen foul of the driving licence not being up to date, either photocard or licence, would be very, very small, even potentially zero. But I don't quite have the statistics that would be able to show me that. But certainly the numbers that fall under the other two categories would tend to suggest that that is the case. I'll stop there, Convener.
Any questions? Councillor Balfour.
Thanks, Convener. Not a question as such. Just my licence actually expired at that point as well. I did get a letter in to say that it was going to expire. However, when the letter arrived, that was several weeks after it expired. So I've got it sorted now, but I don't know if that maybe happened to other people as well, where the letters arrived very late and they didn't realise that their licence had actually expired at that point.
I certainly, it could well have happened, and that might be a consequence of some of kind of other agencies just not having the staff to be able to put these letters out in time. Hence is, I think, why it came to having this extension put on, so that people weren't in that position. But clearly there would be people maybe like yourself who were concerned that they were in a position that they were committing an offence, but clearly they weren't because of the extension.
Anybody?
Thanks.
Any other questions? Can I ask a quick question on the failing to update the photo on a driving licence and offence? I mean, when do you update your photo? I'm obviously an age now where a DVA, they check me every 2 years to see I'm fit to drive, but they never asked me to check to update my photo.
There's
So
2 dates in a licence, and the one that sometimes catches people out is your photo card. I think it's every 10 years you need to update your photo. But then there's an overall expiry date of your licence as well.
yes, yeah.
So the 2 dates are on the photo card.
Okay, I'll have a look at my licence. Thanks for that. Any other questions? Oh, we carry on, Craig. We're near the end.
Getting there. That moves me on to the drug analysis and trends. That's at section 2.7 in the report. And the question that we're asked for was a breakdown of drug crimes to understand what percentage are committed by reoffenders, including trend analysis. So Appendix 2 in the report is submitted provides a detailed breakdown of all the drug offences for those recorded both in the years 2020, 21 and 19 and 20. And looking at the individuals for the offences over the last 2 years, there are 925 for 19 and 20 and 1,043 for 2020 and 21. And narrowing this down to those that have committed at least one drug offence in both years, highlighted the following. There was 112 individuals who were the accused for a drug offence in both years. And of those, 78, that's 70% of the sample, were responsible for more than 2 drug offences. These 112 individuals were responsible for 454 charges over the 2-year period. And looking at the analysis, excuse me, 17% of all charges linked to repeat offenders occurred within the Camlin South beat, followed by 11% in Falkirk Town Centre and 10% in Bainford. And of interest, a quarter of the repeat offenders were female, and the vast majority, 74% of offenders where occupation was recorded were unemployed. And ages at the time of the offence ranged between 15 and 64 years of age. It wasn't possible to identify the number of offenders in the period who were first-time offenders in relation to drug offences. This is quite difficult to do. I certainly looked at those that in the age category that are very young. In 20 and 21, there was 14 incidents for persons 17 years of age and younger, involving 5 individuals. One person, age 17, offended 5 times during that period. I'll stop there, convener.
Any questions, Councillor Balfour?
Thanks, convener. Yeah, just the 17-year-old offending 5 times, that's quite worrying, that they're maybe not getting off to the best start in their life. What was done to try and prevent further offences? What lessons were learned from that, and what changes have you made to try and improve the outcomes for these people?
Councillor, when somebody at that age is challenged by the police or has drugs on them, then we submit a concern report to our concern hub within public protection, and that report is looked at in the realms of all the other agencies that the concern hub deal with, so that they can then decide how best that's progressed, and that's down to the individual, the amount of times they've offended, the frequency of offences. So they would look at every single one on an individual basis, and then target that and share that information where they're allowed to do with other agencies. Clearly, somebody of 17 who's offending could potentially still be at school. If they're at school, then we have a school-based officer in every high school in Falkirk, so they become aware of these as well. And then you also have education as part of that process to try to assist. So there's a myriad of different people and organisations that can assist, but it's a case-by-case basis depending on the actual individual, the type of drug, how they were found, the amount of drug they had. So there wouldn't be a one answer that would fit all in relation to that.
Okay, that sounds quite a complicated issue. So, yeah, okay, thanks for that.
Councillor McCluskey?
This is an area that gives me concern. With it. The report doesn't give me concern, but the facts out there gives me concern. I'm well aware the number of people of school age taking drugs now, and other people selling them to them, and people that run community groups, people in the village tell you know quite a number of individuals that are taking drugs. So where your report says, with people from 15 up, but it worries me that a lot of the people are taking drugs a lot earlier. And as I say, so I just find that know what the report is saying. That's what the public are saying. The other issue, we used to hear a thing when people were charged, and we're well aware in our community when a drug raid goes on, because it's certainly noticeable for your officers to do good jobs. But obviously, when people used to be done for selling large quantities, there used to be an issue that you informed the council, and if it wasn't for their own use and they were obviously selling at a big scale and growing at a big scale, they could lose their house eventually. I do know in main communities there's the amount of work that the council's got today sometimes, because people stick the heat, the ceilings down to let the heat up into the loft, or the last one in the villa a few weeks ago, it's too dear for the electricity for the heating the plants here, so they had gas bottles out the back, heating it in the water tank and up the stair and that. So we do know what goes on, but the worrying thing for the public is that people have been raided on a few occasions, and we wonder why that. If you tell the house, sometimes the house doesn't seem aware of it. So what link have you between yourselves and the council? And is the rules changed that the way you inform them, or is the rules changed in the housing that we can't, put somebody out that's constantly dealing, no using? I mean, obviously people use, but I'm talking about these big dealers. So I wonder if you could give me a wee bit extra on that. The 2 points.
Certainly will, Councillor. There's a few aspects here. If I forget any bit as I go through, please just remind me at the end. you made mention first of all about, people in communities know these individuals, and sometimes it's fairly obvious, as you pointed out. However, I would ask, certainly through your contacts and through community councils, is that if that is known, don't assume that the police are always being informed about it, because some people don't want to speak to the police. So any opportunity to inform us about what's happening, it can really assist us, in terms of taking action. When it comes to executing a warrant, it comes down to how much information we have, and how we can develop that into intelligence, and that can come through a number of means, and it can come through Crime Stoppers, so people don't even have to put their name to it. So anything they can do to encourage people to continually tell us that, because sometimes we'll find that anecdotally that was always known in a community, but we might not know about it.
Yes.
In terms of the council, we're well serviced in Falkirk. We've got an officer who is our local authority liaison officer, who works in a council building and deals with the council on a daily basis in housing. But they also, they're an officer, part of my establishment here at Falkirk, and come into my morning meetings. So by the time I go to my morning meeting, they've already looked at all the incidents and the issues that have happened, and come to my meeting and are able to tell me what the background history is, what housing are doing, what the antisocial behaviour aspects are, and what they need to do, what they can do to try to progress it. And so that's fed in very, very quickly through that process. And we've also got an officer just linked to that works within the conflict resolution service, so again linked to antisocial behaviour as well, and they work very, very closely together. So we have really strong links with our officers here in terms of the council. I understand it's quite a complex area in terms of people's tenancies, but where there is an incident that we can evidence, and once you get to a point of conviction potentially, but that could be some way down the line in terms of the criminal justice system, then there's ways of us disclosing that to the council through our individuals that are based there, so that they can then use that information to have an impact on somebody's tenancy. Ultimately, these people have to be housed somewhere. And so it can just move the issue from one place to another. But I think in terms of respite, in terms of the people who have maybe been brave enough to come forward and give us some information, then it shows us a consequence to the actions of people that are prepared to sell drugs and benefit from that in the local communities.
I thank you for that. And while I was saying that about I know you've got an officer now. I've been a councillor 15 years, but I only became aware of it 2 months ago in the conflict team. I know we used to have some ex-policemen involved in that section, but I didn't know we had actually a policeman now that works on it. To a couple of recent instances where I contacted that team and made aware of it. I don't know if the other councillors are aware of it, but these are things that as councillors and that we should know. And obviously that's the area that we can liaise and go through the council and have him liaising with the police and ensure that something gets looked at. So thank you.
I thought, John,
Councillor?
I was going to say the thought that information should come from the council officers. You should know that, not for coming from the police. But how long do you want in there? Yourself or Craig?
You are correct, convener, and as I says, but
Right,
it was
right.
didn't come for the council officers.
Right.
I think there's some of them in the call, so hope they're listening. Thank you.
Convener, if
Yeah,
you're
Craig.
happy, I'll certainly take that on board, and certainly for the next report, I'll have a fairly lengthy section just in the work that officer does, just as a way of update. It's a fairly new officer that's taken over that role after an officer retired, but I'll get a fairly lengthy update in the next scrutiny report, which will hopefully show the range of work that they do and how that links between the council and ourselves, and maybe some examples that will be anonymised that will show how effective they are.
Thank you for that, Craig. Any other
Convener,
questions?
one last point, just when you said that would have been an excellent subject, and I know it's next year before you're coming back, but on that as well, because it's drugs, I'm hearing quite an issue in the grapevine that through drugs, an awful lot of organised crimes doing shoplifting now, and people who are users, and obviously I know how busy you are as police officers, but people are saying, these businesses are saying maybe we didn't respond too quick or that, and maybe, through your economic development team or yourselves, we could try to get an idea the volume of concern like shoplifting is, you know, through drugs and that, and how you know, how much time it takes for these to try to deal with that very it's a big problem. We all know that, and it's a lot of finance for these retailers to the amount of volume that they're losing. So, could you maybe look at that in a future report next year, coming back on that question as well? Thank you.
Will do, Councillor. Happy to do that.
Are you okay, Craig? You want to move on? No more questions?
Thank you very much. That moves on to the next section, which was the disorder and antisocial behaviour stats. You may remember from the last report that those statistics weren't available at the time of publishing there. So I've put them in there. They show a fairly substantial increase during the year 2021 for Falkirk and for Police Scotland as a whole. There was a 33% rise in disorder and a 31% rise in antisocial behaviour. And both mirrored that of the force, but slightly lower rise in Falkirk overall. As a result of the initial lockdown in 2020, we did see a significant increase in the number of complaints, with a second spike recorded after the second lockdown was announced in December last year. We do believe that some of the statistics round about this will be fairly specifically guided towards that year. So the direction of travel for the current year, certainly looking at it, is back towards normal levels of reporting in terms of disorder and antisocial behaviour. And we'll continue to monitor that as the year progresses, and that will of course be reported in the next scrutiny report to ensure that's the case. Stop there, convener.
Any questions to the officer? No. Rising. There obviously is an alarming increase in numbers, and the probability is people staying at home and playing loud music and whatever. I don't know if that's been the problem, but hopefully it'll turn around and the numbers will go down.
Convener, yeah, certainly. I think because of the spikes that we got at lockdown, it certainly was people, you know, within their houses, complaints about neighbours, noise complaints, parties, people attending at people's flats, houses. That seemed to kind of fuel the spike in the calls, we believe, in terms of that year. A lot of the calls were about partying where people shouldn't have been there. Is that right? Because they were keep apart. Yeah. Okay. Okay. No more questions. Okay. Want to move on? Okay. Thank you. Up to section 2.9 of the report, which was a COVID travel guidance. So there was a report on enforcement during lockdown. The numbers who were stopped during that for breaching travel restrictions. There was mention of only being stopped if another crime was committed, and I spoke about that at the last meeting. But I think there was a desire to have an understanding of how this worked, and we didn't really have any statistics to back it up at the time. So Police Scotland's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the changing guidance has always been that officers had to rapidly adapt to what they had to do, and a policing style which was adopted across the country, which followed the 4 E's, which was engage, explain, encourage, and enforcement being the last option, where people wouldn't really engage with any of the first 3. And the legislative travel restrictions that really came into play were introduced at the start of November 2020, and that was the tiering, where you would have people travelling from one tier to another, which would be in breach of the guidelines and the law, and potentially lead them to be getting a ticket. So certainly looking at the offences there, the total number of persons issued with a fixed penalty notice in Falkirk under the travel guidelines was 8, with a further 2 persons being arrested. It's a very low number and a consequence of the policing style that we adopted. And it also demonstrated that there was no practice introduced of any types of random checks on people or vehicles, which I think was one of the concerns that were raised. When we dealt with people contravening travel regulations, it was generally because we were dealing with them because of other issues, and it was included when we found out that they had breached those travel restrictions. So the numbers are fairly small, I think indicative of the style and the activities that we engaged in during that period. I'll stop there, Councillor.
Okay, Craig, any questions? Question. I think obviously the rules are all changed again since the lockdowns are finished. I assume you can travel anywhere in the country.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, you
thank
can.
you. Okay,
Thank you. That takes me on to the last section in the report, which we were asked back in May, just for an update on the UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties, COP26, which is frighteningly close now. And I'll pass you to Chief Superintendent Gibson, who'll give an update on that, if that's okay, Convener.
absolutely, Craig, absolutely.
Thanks, Convener. There is no written report. I'll speak to this. I'll cover a couple of kind of bullet points, and then I'll just pause for questions, because you may have some points and questions to come back with. The climate change conference, as you all know, I'm sure you all know, I don't think you can hide from it at the moment, is some, from a policing perspective, 24 days until we start deploying people to the island site in Glasgow, and obviously start to facilitate the entry and the staying of foreign delegations from a whole host of different countries. Without getting into a huge amount of detail, we are definitely in excess of 100 heads of state from around the world coming into to Glasgow and Scotland. Folk talk about this being a Glasgow-centric conference. I would probably suggest, from a policing perspective, it's a Scotland-wide conference. It has an impact up and down the country, west, east, north, south. But I'd imagine, from a scrutiny perspective, what you would wish me to give you is comfort that Falkirk, the Falkirk communities, are not going to be detrimented during COP26. And I can give you that assurance here today. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about how we're going to do that. This is the single biggest policing operation probably in the history of the UK. I've been in the police for 27 years. I've never seen something so big, so complex and so challenging as what lies in front of us in 24 days' time. That said, the plans are, as you would like to hope, are far advanced, and we're now just polishing off certain elements of preparations, as I say, predominantly to protect and ensure a safe and secure conference in Glasgow. But also there's other elements to it. Obviously, the facilitation of these foreign heads of states, and in fact our own heads of state, up and down and around the central belt of Scotland. There will be a range of different events obviously taking place in Glasgow, but we were likely to see other events taking place in Edinburgh, and no doubt perhaps other things in the central Scotland belt as a whole. And again, as our role in all this, policing is only one small part of the conference. However, obviously it's a big part in terms of making sure that the conference can go ahead in a safe and secure way. But also there will be those that will travel and obviously attend in and around the central belt to peacefully protest, and obviously Police Scotland will, as a rights-based organisation, human rights-based organisation, will do our utmost to ensure that folks' rights are respected, and we facilitate that. Again, the backdrop for that being that obviously our communities also still need to go about their lawful day-to-day business. So again, we're in the unenviable position of, again, trying to facilitate peaceful, lawful protest, but also allowing our communities to operate as normally as possible, because we're also really conscious that, from a policing perspective, that lots of people, potentially folk in Falkirk, have no interest in COP26 and just want to go about their daily business in a normal fashion. So again, that is first and foremost, is trying to make sure we strike the right balance. Probably also worth pointing out is that we won't tolerate unlawful violence or disorder related protest and associated activities. And again, there is no intelligence to provide you today that that's going to occur either in Glasgow or indeed in the Falkirk area. But I think it would be naive of us on this call here today to not suspect that the facility at Grangemouth will not attract some element of protest, whether that be peaceful or whatever. And again, we're well prepared to deal with that should that come about. But again, there are a number of, there's a range of moving parts, as I alluded to in the early part of what I mentioned. We're also conscious of the road network in and around Falkirk, M876, M9, and obviously the M80. And obviously you'll all have seen the matters that have taken place in and around London over the last few weeks. And again, we stand prepared to deal with similar issues should they come to the surface in and around COP26. obviously, because we will see world leaders staying in Forth Valley area. We will see them transiting through it on a daily basis, as well as delegates for the conference and a whole host of others, against, as I say, the backdrop of communities in Forth Valley and Falkirk specifically trying to go about their daily business. So yeah, a really challenging set of circumstances. However, I'm really comfortable with the plans that we've got in place for the event itself. I have a key appointment in that event, but also, probably more importantly to all of you on the call, is to business as usual. So Craig will be in Falkirk, as he always is, making sure that the officers and staff in Falkirk are doing what they always do, which is keeping our communities safe in Falkirk. There is no leave. Our police officer leave has been cancelled. There is no training. All training has been cancelled, and we're being supported by a range of officers from around the UK who are coming predominantly with specialist skills to assist us to make sure that that conference is safe and secure, but also that we can continue to police our communities in Falkirk, as we always do. What I would say is we will also turn off some non-critical back office functions, and again concentrate on making sure that we're answering our calls and dealing with service demand as normal. And obviously our criminal justice partners in the courts are reducing the demand on us by stopping a range of summary courts during the COP26 period, again to try and reduce the demand on us so that we can concentrate on ensuring public service. So as I say, lots in that, I know, and hopefully it's given you some helpful kind of commentary on what the event holds, but also what happens here in Forth Valley and specifically Falkirk for the event itself. But happy to pause there and take any comments, questions or queries if that's helpful.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Grant?
Thank you, Convener. Thanks for that report, Alan. Just a quick question. I take it Forth Valley, Falkirk have no actually any planned road closures in place. You know, in Glasgow it keeps going over the radio that this road will be shut and this road will be shut. I take it Falkirk, Forth Valley have not actually got any planned road closures.
No, to my knowledge, we don't have any planned road closures. I'm unaware of any, if you like, side events that may take place in Falkirk or Stirling or anywhere else which might facilitate the need for that. But as I understand it, and Craig will keep me right here, I'm unaware of any in Falkirk planned road closures. Obviously, if there was any kind of events that might be planned, and I think there was talk of something on the 5th or 6th of November, maybe locally in Falkirk, which I think the council might have been looking at. And I don't know if there's a need for that, Craig. Maybe you want to come in and answer that one.
We're aware of the event there. I think it's in the 6th. There's a festival there. We'll have the Storm Puppet, which has been deployed elsewhere in Forth Valley, which will be here. My understanding is there will be some minor road closures to facilitate that, but that's just for that one-off event. It'll be for a fairly short period of time, but in general there'll be no road closures related to the event. They'll be ongoing for any length of time.
Yeah, again, Councillor Grant, coming back to your point, the movement of VIPs. I mean, there's no state secrets in what I'm going to tell you here, but the level of some of the folk that we've got coming are of such a level that they come with a fairly heavy presence on the road. And if they're travelling by road, we may have to facilitate some very temporary restrictions on road traffic to allow, for example, a motorcade to move through. And please don't read anything into that. I'm not telling you who they are, but I'd imagine there will be fairly significant VIPs moving through Forth Valley at various points during the conference, which might cause a wee bit of disruption on the roads. But again, our road policing officers will facilitate that to again minimise the disruption to the community, because again, folks still want to get to school and go to work and get to Tesco and all these other things that folk do on a day-to-day basis. Hopefully that helps, Councillor.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Craig. Thanks, Convener.
Any other questions? Could I just ask about obviously the peaceful protesting, and you're going to be aware there'll be protesting. I mean, it's happening down south, and peaceful protesting in the eyes of some of these protesters is shutting off motorways, sitting across motorways. We've potentially a couple of major areas in Falkirk that we could see protesters coming to, and Ineos is obviously one of them. And we've got the Kelpies, which is ideal for protesters climbing and getting their banners. So you must be concerned about these particular areas.
I suppose concern's a strong word. I suppose sadly we're well versed in both those sites, Convener, in terms of we've had folk climbing the Kelpies in the last year, as Craig knows, and we've dealt with them effectively. It's a particularly dangerous thing to do, but as I say, we are well versed in tactics to intervene in that process and make sure we resolve that quickly and safely. Equally at Ineos, again, I've been involved, as Craig has, in rehearsing of a range of major incident plans. for the business at NAS. We do that on a very regular basis, I'm sure you're all aware anyway, but we've also given some distinct thought to protest. And again, over the last year, we've had XR demonstrate at NAS. So again, we've had experience of that and how we go about resolving that. And again, it's been done peacefully, but it is disruptive. And again, we need to strike a balance between allowing people to exercise and their rights, but also ensuring that the public are allowed to go about their business, because the disruption can be particularly acute. And some of you will have seen the video footage from down south, I'm sure, where folk were very irate about being disrupted and missing hospital appointments and a whole range of different things. So it's trying to strike that balance, I suppose, is always the trick. So I'm concerned, as I say, is probably quite a strong word, but I said, to give you comfort, we're well rehearsed. I'm like you say, I'm not going to carry anybody on that we're not going to have any protests, because I think it would be absolutely reasonable to assume that we are going to have that. When, where, how, the scale of is probably the ask that we don't know at the moment. That may well become clearer in the days ahead, because again, some groups make their intention known, some do not. Again, we've got a range of specialist officers who we will have in Tap in Forth Valley to assist us to resolve that. We also have protest liaison officers who are well skilled and well versed in speaking with protesters and trying to find and manage an equitable way forward where the public get a return to normality quickly, but also the protesters get to make their point. What I would say, and here's an element of practicality for you, I've worked out that whoever had COP26 in November is a genius, because there's probably only about 6 hours of usable sunlight, if indeed it does sun at all. It gets daylight at 9 and it's dark by 3, so you kind of have to make your point between 9 and 3, I would humbly suggest. So otherwise it's probably in the dark. So, but that's just my amateur sort of psychology, I suppose, if that's helpful.
Thanks, Alan. Any other questions? Sorry, Councillor Balfour.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, is there any, I take it you will have plans in place to assist other emergency services, like, for example, fire service getting to an incident, or somebody having to get rushed to hospital in an ambulance or something like that, if there's issues with road closures, or not an official closure, but if there's issues with protests in the roads that are causing obstruction?
Yeah, absolutely. What we would do, Councillor, is we would always do that in a range of different circumstances, is communicate with our colleagues in NHS, fire service and ambulance service, one, to let them know what's ongoing, so we can stand up a range of, and we often, well, not often, but we do stand up Resilience Partnership and other kind of quick action forums, which will facilitate that information sharing, so that either emergency service partners can take different routes, avoid the area, or indeed, if we need to, if it's actually there's no other route, then we facilitate a way through. Again, using protest liaison officers and a range of other tactics. So again, well versed. Again, it's a really important point. I mean, the Forth Valley Royal is in a really important facility for all of us on this call. So again, I'm really acutely aware that sits on the motorway network, and obviously that's a particularly important facility to make sure it's accessible, particularly to the ambulance service. And obviously the fire service obviously need to get access up and down the road network as well. So yeah, well covered, I would suggest.
Okay, thanks for that.
Any other questions? Should not finish your report, gentlemen.
Thank you, Convener.
Thanks, Convener. I think Councillor McCluskey was
Sorry.
going to come in with a comment there, I think.
Sorry,
My point
did
in
see him
this is,
avoid them.
I know. My point in this is that peaceful protests, and nothing wrong with peaceful protests. This country's always been proud of the fact that you're allowed to do peaceful protests. But when you block a main road off, say that is, and like we say, there's fire engines, there's deliveries, essential folk for their medicines and all that, and these things can't get through, then it is a major issue. I did see a bit in the press, in the press, the news earlier just got an end that Westminster's trying to look at new powers. Is there any suggestion that anything would be coming to us in Scotland?
So much, Councillor McCluskey, I'm not cited in anything specifically coming to us, to be honest. I'm comfortable that we have sufficient powers to deal with those types of issues here in Scotland as it is. I mean, again, we're well rehearsed in protest activity. potentially not to the volume that's seen down, particularly in and around London, but certainly through our activities at Faslane, Ineos, and a range of other facilities, we're well rehearsed in that. So I don't foresee it being a big issue. But again, it's something that obviously we'll keep a watching brief on. But probably too soon to that event to make any meaningful change to legislation now, to be honest. But again, I'm pretty comfortable we have what we need.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, before I let you go, could I maybe just touch on the two incidents in the UK that have put the police in firmly in the media radar? The incident with the lone officer murdering or charged with murdering a female. Another one with a female armed response officer being discriminated by fellow officers. What reassurances can we give the public that, particularly female members of the public, that they should have confidence in the police force? Because I know it's a minority, but it's certainly causing quite a bit of eruption amongst the people in Britain, particularly women.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I'll come in and I'll ask Craig to see if he has anything he wishes to add with. But yeah, you bring up an important point. Clearly a very important issue, clearly one that's caused a lot of consternation. In terms of reassurance, I suppose first and foremost, the onus is on us as a police service to make sure we reassure people. So you may or may not have seen over the weekend, we instigated an opportunity for folk who are anyway concerned if they're engaging with a police officer or police officers and regarding their either their identity or their motives or anything else, that they can actually request a control room on the radio that the officer has to broadcast a message identifying who that officer is and what he or she is doing and why they're doing it, etc. So there is a reassurance sort of message has been put across in terms of that on social media. I'm happy to share that, or maybe Craig can share it with the group as to what that process is all about. And again, it's been widely put across Twitter and other social media platforms to give people the opportunity to challenge officers in circumstances where they feel that a challenge is appropriate. Again, because the onus is us to reassure people, particularly lone females, that should they be engaging with a police officer, that individual is genuine and the motives for him or her engaging with them is genuine as well. I suppose there's an element of practicality in this, is that the vast majority of our officers operate in pairs. So that's very different to England and Wales, where a vast percentage of their officers operate singly. So, albeit I'm never going to suggest that it could never happen in Scotland, officers tend to operate in pairs. Occasions when they operate singly are relatively rare, and ironically, probably in very specific environments, I suppose. So, for example, school-based officers operate singly, and a lot of their work is about protecting vulnerability within schools and supporting people, within the schooling environment. So there are other examples, but by and large, if you look next time you're out and about, most cars are staffed by 2 officers, and most foot patrols are 2 officers. But again, there is that safeguarding piece that I mentioned there on the radio, which again will not solve all the issues, but maybe go some way to trying to do that. In terms of vetting, you maybe have also heard about our vetting. Again, we've instigated a new way of further vetting for officers, which again is never going to be absolutely fool proof and watertight. But again, it's a further check and balance to make sure that folks that work for us are vetted on a more regular basis, again trying to establish any behaviours which might be of concern to us. Again, I'm going to pause there and see if Craig has anything that I've perhaps missed or he would wish to add.
Thanks. All I'd like to say is, we're very fortunate in Scotland in that, we police with consent, but it shows in light of instances like this just how delicate that is. And the public need to have confidence in the police doing the right thing, and that's not just with the public, but also how we deal with each other as well. So these things are taken very seriously. In terms locally here, the moves that have been put in place to try to reassure the public that when they are dealing with a police officer, then it's a bona fide police officer and bona fide business. I've certainly, so I've got that on Monday this week, been pushing out that locally, so that I'll make sure that every officer under my command is fully aware of the expectations. And it's not something I take lightly, because the impact on my area here or in Forth Valley of an incident where an officer didn't identify themselves or didn't follow that protocol, if there was nothing untoward, it would really seriously impact community confidence here. So it's something I take very seriously. I'm proud of being a police officer, and I want to continue to say that. So that's why these things kind of hit home really strongly as we do take it personally, both ourselves and the job that we do and the profession that we work for. And so we will work hard to make sure that's put in place, and any further guidance that comes out, there are things that we can do to help reassure the public that we're on their side and we're doing the right thing. And then I'll make sure that I use my position here to enforce that and make sure it's done by all the officers under my command.
Certainly encouraging to hear, and welcome that, and I hope that some of the major news channels can relay that to the public as well, that message to the public as well, because they're quick to relay messages of doom, but I certainly welcome that.
Convener, if I can come in, Craig makes a really important point, which I should have made right at the very start, which is we're as outraged as anybody else with that. To be frank, we, you know, the vast majority of our police officers, you know, the vast majority will be utterly outraged by what happened down south, as much as anybody in this call is. You know, we take it personally, and our heart always sinks when we see stuff happen, wherever it happens in the UK or indeed the US. We've seen stuff, as you know, in this call, we've seen stuff happen in the US in the last 18 months to 2 years, which has rippled across the Atlantic. And again, it causes us as much concern and outrage as it does anybody on this call. So I suppose it's worth underscoring that point. The second point you mentioned was obviously the firearms officer. I think that's well played out in the media. I don't know, to be frank, I don't know any more than probably what anybody in this call knows. What I know is what I've read on the media. I've not been briefed on it. But what I would say is that treating people with respect and dignity, it's almost exactly the same conversation that Craig and I just had. That is how we're wired up. We always have been. That's why we joined public service. And again, we should never in any way, shape or form step away from treating people with dignity and respect. So as we would any member of the public, we should do so with each other as colleagues. So again, this is not behaviour that I would tolerate within Forth Valley. And again, I would like to hope that in any shape or form that any colleague of mine would be calling that out and dealing with it. But again, I don't know enough about the circumstances to say much more than that. Again, unless Craig has anything he wishes to add.
No, nothing further on that, sir.
Okay. Councillor McCluskey.
Aye, just in saying that, obviously, you mean we've got an armed response unit up, obviously, at Madison, and I had the pleasure some time ago and going looking at it, and I was completely reassured that the officers, what they go through daily to make sure that they're in good, obviously mentally and physically, to be able to go in and if they needed to take a firearm that day, and the monitoring and scrutiny and that we do. So I'm certainly more reassured when I've went up and visited and looked at the armed response unit in my own local area. So that maybe other members haven't took that opportunity, but I think that would reassure a lot of people. And if it assures us, it'll probably reassure the community that we serve. Thank you.
Convener, if I can maybe come back in, one to thank
Yeah.
Councillor McCluskey for those comments. I alluded to a command role that I have in Oppurum. I'm the strategic firearms commander for Oppurum, which is the climate change conference. I have the unenviable task of keeping that venue safe for the entirety of the event. So all the firearms officers will sit under my command, and I have to say the men and women that work in there are some of the most highly trained, committed officers in the organisation. Not to suggest that the ones in Forth Valley are not, but they're the incredibly stressful job that they have, and they work really hard to maintain their competence and capability. So I recognise and welcome Councillor McCluskey's comments. As I say, what I do know about the commentary, what I read in the media, that it was from a number of years ago, and that's not to make excuses, but certainly I've never experienced or seen the activity that was mentioned in the media. Personally, I would never stand for it. And again, given that I've got that command role within that operation, those men and women will be treated with the utmost dignity and respect, I can assure you that.
Thanks for that, Alan. No more questions? Gentlemen, thank you very much for your contribution this morning. I know it's been quite lengthy. Thank you. Before we go to the next agenda item, could we have a 10-minute comfort break and come back at 12 o'clock? Okay.
Convener, I take it's okay if we just leave the meeting?
Absolutely, yes. Unless you want to stay on and watch it. You're busy, man. You're busy, man. Thank you again to your
You know I
contribution.
listen to me on the mirror. That's the truth of it. You know what I mean?
Thanks, Convener. I appreciate it.
I'm going to sit and listen to you the rest of the afternoon.
Oh, I can.
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, colleagues.
Want to go? Welcome back. Can we go to agenda item 5, following public bound Falkirk Community Trust. Neil, I believe you're taking this one.
Yes, thanks, Convener. I'd like to introduce Leslie O'Hare today, Cultural Library Managers, who is attending the meeting.
I'd also like to start with a short summary, if you don't mind, Convener, just to summarise the whole year. As the Director of Corporate Housing Services report states, the 2021 financial year occurred throughout the whole period of the COVID-19 pandemic. This virus had a significant impact, obviously, on all of our customers who would normally have enjoyed our services. Similarly, this virus greatly impacted on all Trust staff in one way or another. At previous scrutiny committees, we have usually referred to our annual performance in the format of numerous bar charts per site and service, and that would show previous trends, targets, and actual performance. This year, however, such information is invalid, and although it's been attached in the report, it was deliberately put in the report to demonstrate the impact that the pandemic has had on services in terms of participation levels in particular. We therefore, in 2021, adapted our resource and delivered other services which supported not only the community during the time of need, but the NHS and the country as a whole, as we did everything we could probably do to provide staff and facility support wherever possible. And I've included in the report, Convener, Appendix 4, which summarises how we supported the NHS throughout the year. However, as a charitable organisation, we needed to remain financially solvent, irrespective of all the external challenges we faced. And this was achieved through the attraction of several external support grants when they became available, the UK Government's Job Retention Scheme, and of course the financial support of the Council. Our annual report, which I will refer to in Appendix 2, outlines the importance of the 3 key themes that developed in 2021. The first being keeping our communities healthy and active, the second being keeping our communities creative, and thirdly, keeping our communities safe. And within this annual report, we have attempted to describe what specific activities were delivered and what support was provided. The Council's decision, however, in January to wind the Trust up at a time when the majority of our staff were about to return to their second period of furlough and national lockdown was a motivational blow to Trust staff and led to increased levels of uncertainty and anxiety as to what the future was to hold for them. However, despite the challenges that came our way throughout that year, I'm immensely proud of the achievements and particularly proud of Trust staff who demonstrated resilience, flexibility and commitment to providing support to the community wherever it was possible to do so. I hope that the information contained within the annual report summarises the year that we've just underwent, and hopefully it provides a flavour of the Trust performance in 2021. And I'll hand back to you, Convener, if that's okay.
Thanks for that, Neil. Any questions to Neil on the report?
Convener?
Yes.
I have a question about the commentary, if that's acceptable.
Question about the what?
Mr. Brown's preamble.
Yeah, carry on, that's the question.
Mr. Brown mentioned that there's increased levels of anxiety about the staffing situation. I was under the impression that all Trust staff would be paid over to become local authority staff members. So perhaps I'm misinformed in that. That would be sort of question part 1, if that can be clarified. And if I'm not misinformed and that's the case, could Mr. Brown explain why there is this perceived level of anxiety with Trust staff? Is there a breakdown in communication between the Trust management or whichever Trust officer or perhaps council officer is responsible for conveying that the local authority has a policy of no compulsory redundancies and that there is this 2Ping over to like for like employment, it seems to me that this anxiety is not necessary. But I'm seeking clarification on that. Thank you.
Yes, I can answer both those points, Convener. I think the first one is a general statement that I made, and Councillor's assumption that all staff isn't necessarily the case, and I include myself in that position. So without going into my personal circumstances, then it would be the intention of the council to transfer as many staff as possible that they could. But at the same breath, the council's decision quite clearly sought savings in salary costs. Therefore, all trust staff will not be transferred across in that situation, Councillor Coleman. The second issue was more a general point about change, and I've heard a lot this morning about human behaviour in relation to Police Scotland, and it's clear that with the uncertainties around the pandemic, and would their facility reopen or would it remain closed? And you'll recall and be aware that throughout Scotland, many facilities in the community leisure sector have not reopened. We have reopened all of our sites and services, and that does give our trust staff a level of comfort that all is well. But against the pandemic, the second closure period, the council decision, that all engenders a further sense of change. And whilst I'm not, and anyone in the trust is not necessarily aware of what those changes will bring, and I don't think anyone in the room can anticipate what those changes will bring, that level of uncertainty is indeed a level of uncertainty. And I think, to be frank as well, having watched, and many of our staff watched on live on YouTube, the public criticism of the trust at the meeting in December, January, and subsequently June, the position of some elected members has been made quite clear, and that has impacted in a level of uncertainty, certainly for senior staff. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Any other questions? Obviously, Neil, the last 12 to 18 months has been a very difficult time for the trust and the lack of operation because of COVID, and it's very difficult to. We're supposed to scrutinise the performance of the trust over the last 12 months, and it's very difficult to. Well, you actually can't scrutinise a performance that's not there. As you said, you've identified forced development participation sessions provided, and there's very little there for the last year. And according to MOAC, the school's number of district participants, there's nothing there, so it's very difficult for us to scrutinise an operation that wasn't operating. Councillor McCluskey, you want in?
Firstly, the first thing to say, I listened to Councillor Coleman there, and it just seems extraordinary. You know, you're asking questions about the trust, and you know, still a director of that body, and actually run it. Is that not true? You're, in which case, I'm sure you should be declaring an interest in, because you're criticising yourself here, because. You know,
is it appropriate that in a scrutiny meeting that I am questioned? I'm happy to answer this question.
Councillor McCluskey.
Unnecessary. I asked a genuine question based on Mr. Brown's preamble.
I accepted it.
And educated me, and I'm happy with that. I don't feel the need to turn this into any political issue. Mr. Brown's made it clear that my understanding of the 2Ping is inaccurate, and that's fine with me. I was.
I allowed the question, Councillor Coleman. I allowed the question.
Okay, well, I'll answer the question then, shall I, Convener? Since it was directed at me.
No. Councillor McCluskey, I'm doing a question on the performance of the trust in the last 12 months, and let's have it.
Right, obviously, my question is in relation to the trust. There is two certainly high peaks in the last 12 months. We know that the difficulties the trust have had over that period. And the two things that amaze me is how much the figures have went up in both the Helix and Muravenside Country Park. And I know that there were a lot of concerns from folk here in West Lothian who use the Muravenside Country Park, what was going to be happening to that. But my issue is that these two major attractions, I mean, you see from the figures how many folk, goes to the Helix and that. These are loss makers to the council, to the trust board. And we rely on other services and the trust getting its charitable status and saving £1 million in rates and things to help mitigate these important facilities. Now the question has to be asked, and obviously the directors there ask, why? What are we going to do in the future? Do you believe we'll be able to maintain the two excellent facilities, the Helix and the Muravenside Country Park, that has, tripled their attendance when we have to pay £1 million rates and they'll get the grants and that
You ask them to.
the trust? I'm asking the question.
Convener, in terms of our position in the trust, it's not one that I think I can clearly answer, and I think that position is unknown. We have communicated with our staff that we do not believe that there are any plans from the council to close any sites or withdraw any services at the point of transfer. Obviously, there'll be discussions with the directors of the services and the council in terms of the budget working group, and of course the budget setting process with that in March. That's out with my remit, and I'm unable to comment. But my hope would be that all our services that we currently operate would continue and grow, and there's no reason why they shouldn't. I've heard the expression that the trust services are going back to the council, and I would remind members that many of the services that we have taken over or created were never operated by the council in the first place, and the Helix is one that comes to mind. We're about to hand over the operation of a 5-star visitor attraction to the council, and that wasn't one that existed in July 2011. So there will be new services that the council will be taking on. As I say, there are opportunities from merging the services with the council. What those look like at the moment, I think it's far too soon to say. Thanks.
I would also like to point, and it would be remiss of me not to mention the fact that Maureen Campbell, the chief exec of the trust, is the one that delivered, as I say, the Helix to Falkirk, and we're getting all the benefit from. So I believe she's also one of the people that's not transferring over. It seems that the Falkirk Council, somebody that's brought things like that isn't going to be given a job.
That's not.
It's no longer with the trust. Councillor Grant.
So I'm just making a point.
Thank you,
Yes,
Convener.
thank you.
I understand Councillor McCulloch making a point, but all these questions have been asked at council meetings. This is a scrutiny for the trust. It's not about the £1 million charity, etc., etc.
Excuse me, we're into it. We're
Right,
not talking
right.
as a council. We're into
Councillor
the trust.
McCluskey. Councillor McCluskey.
I keep getting them.
Apologies for that, Neil.
Today,
Any other questions? Any other questions related to the report and the performance of the trust in the last 12 months?
Let's move on.
No. Neil, thank you very much for your attendance. Obviously, this is the last time the trust will appear in front of the external scrutiny committee, because in April next year they'll be back in the folds of the council. Can I thank you for all you've done over the years for the trust? It's been very successful, and I thank you for that. And you okay?
I appreciate those comments, Convener. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Brian, I don't like to listen to your comments for the side, please.
Take us to agenda item 6, following the public protection. I think we've got Gail McIntyre and Joanna Stewart.
Maybe ask you.
Okay. Who's leading it? Is it Gail or?
Hi, I'm here to talk about the Sacro Youth Justice report as part of the public
Yeah,
pound.
Right. Take that first then.
She's
What do you
gone.
got, Ed? Gail?
Sorry, apologies. Were you looking for me to provide an overview of the report that I've submitted?
Yes, please.
Yep, certainly, that's fine. So, in Children's Services, we commission the services and support from Sacro Youth Justice Service. They're providing one and a part-time worker to deliver early intervention and restorative work for children involved in antisocial behaviour and offending in our community. So they're delivering services to children and families aged between 8 and 18, using a range of different methods and looking at a range of different things to explore the issues underlying their offending behaviour, as noted in the report. So looking at things like well-being, education and work, communication, behaviour and choices. So this is part of our strategy, as I said, for early intervention, so that we can reduce the risk of further offending, reduce the risk of issues escalating and becoming more problematic and serious offending, and also to reduce the risk of those young people coming into statutory social work services, potentially being at risk of being accommodated and in the most highest end of concern and offending behaviour, potentially secure accommodation. So all of these would obviously have poor outcomes for the young people, but also significant costs to our local authority in terms of the different interventions and the costs of, for instance, care placements. I'm not sure the level of detail you'd like me to go into, but that would be a brief overview of what they're providing for us at the moment.
Thanks for that, Gail. Are there any questions to Gail in her report? Councillor McCluskey?
Yes, convener. The report tells us that we're doing 1% to the obviously overall funding of Sacro. Is that ring fence money that comes for the government and we pay a percentage, or how does other neighbouring authorities, what do they contribute? How's it worked out?
So to my knowledge, we don't get any specific ring-fenced funding for youth justice services, which is different from adult services. So it's a small amount of our early intervention and family support funding that we use to provide that service.
So can you update me what the other councillors put in proportion? Have you any indication what the other 31 councils contribute to? This is obviously a national service, isn't it?
It's a national service, but this part of it is just what Falkirk Council commission for the needs of our young people in our communities. So each local authority will have their own model of youth justice services and their own ways of delivering services. So I couldn't comment on what the other local authorities across Scotland provide in terms of youth justice.
All I'm saying as convener is we're asked to look at the report, but we've no comparisons with other authorities and how effective they are there for comparisons. Also, we have 53 cases we dealt with in the last year, but it doesn't tell us how well we're working. Has that been a year-on-year improvement in less cases, right, to show that the funding is effective? Or how does it compare with other years?
I think in comparison, the numbers are very similar, and that's because the service we commission is fairly small. So we ask that they deliver services to a minimum of 50 young people per year. We are in discussions with them regularly within our monitoring meetings and really keen to have targets for increased service delivery. So we want them to be providing more where possible, but that in terms of numbers, that is very similar to the last couple of years.
I'm only trying to ascertain that we've got excellent children's services now, and obviously they're dealing with young people and social work, and we're also trying to folks mental health and well-being. And I'm trying to say that at comparison, could we provide in if it was under that service rather than Sacro? And obviously I've not to compare way. So is it to keep on going? You know, we're here to ask about the public pound. So what we're trying to go ascertain is this the best value that Falkirk can get? If it is, you know, but we've got to compare it with other things to show that it's viable, it's effective, it's working, or is it something that we could take up as a council service, a party, and keep that budget into children's services and do a similar job. So obviously I see the Director of Education's one again. Yeah.
Just to say, Councillor McLuckie, that I'm certainly unaware about how Sacro as a national organisation is funded, whether it gets a direct grant from Scottish Government, I think is perhaps likely, and then what happens is that they make available services which individual councils will procure, and you'll see within this document that I think 3 years ago, what happened in terms of the budget process was that there was a fairly significant review of payments made to external organisations across the council, and there was a drop in the expenditure, which gave rise to the point that Gail's just made, which is about our effective agreement with them, is that they will engage with no fewer than 50 young people per year. I think your wider point is something that, as we go through closer to home and possibly linking back to the input from police colleagues earlier this morning, one of the things that we need to respond to is if there was an emerging pattern of increased numbers of young people being involved in the criminal justice, then we would need to take a view as to whether or not we needed to increase this service and or decrease this service. And it may well be, and I don't know the answer to this, but it may well be that, for example, perhaps Glasgow maybe spends considerably more with Sacro, maybe given the profile of the demographic there. So it's something that I think in terms of scrutiny, what we're able to look at is what's the engagement been like, what support has been able to be offered to these children and their families, and how do we manage to keep them away from the criminal justice system, and or if they have been involved and have been convicted of something, how do we support police and others to stop them reoffending?
Convener, what I may say is obviously the comparisons to other councils, and some councils are obviously huge councils, and trying to get some of the answers. It may be that maybe we could get a follow-up report on this, trying to say the trends in history and some of the other agencies' view. We've got a duty following the public pound to look at sometimes maybe increase payments, but we have a huge budget deficit, and if we're not getting value for money, we also have to maybe look at reducing it. So we need the proper facts to go and assess it. I am not I'm not disrespecting the this particular agency. I mean, for all things that we consider, we've got an obligation under scrutiny to look at that sort of thing. So, as I say, the fact that we've no comparisons for other years or our feedback, you know, and vision compare it with if we were running it, what kind of comparisons we'd get. I find it hard to scrutinise and just to accept it, but I do think we need a more extensive report back in the future. We going into some more detail into this.
Robert, do you want to respond to that?
Well, we could certainly make inquiries of SACRO to answer the question about where does their overall funding come from? What do other councils commission from them? Do they commission more? Do they commission less? I imagine some councils maybe aren't engaged with them at all. I would need to task an officer to go away and do a bit of research on that. But in terms of your other point, Councillor McLuckie, certainly in a future report, we could, I think, probably with some ease, say this is how many families we engaged with last year, this is how many we engaged with this year, this is how many we intend to engage with next year, and that might give you a bit more of the detail that I think it is that you're looking for, and I think maybe we could also and it's difficult because quite often the outcomes achieved are subjective rather than objective. So, you know, you engage with a family or a young person, and that help and support is appreciated and guides somebody towards maybe a more stable pathway. But you know, it's not something that you can say was it a success, yes, no. It's a scale of help and support that takes people in the right direction, but it would be difficult to say, you know, we engage with 50 young people and, you know, 25 of them will never need any engagement ever again. That's kind of unlikely to be the case, but we could certainly look at how we could quantify maybe a bit more our evaluation of the success or otherwise of the intervention.
Aye, I mean, I think we all, Convener, agree that early intervention is a good way, and it's hard to judge sometimes what you're preventing if you've managed got success and you've prevented it from happening, and somebody ended up in jail and that, and later on. So I understand what you're saying, and it was a good point, like you said. Are we putting enough into it? Should we put more? Should we put less? And that's why I feel that we need to see what would be the bit if we reduced it. Yeah, I know, which might be alarming, or should it be increased? And that's the kind of information we need to make a judgment. So, thank you.
I think also, Councillor, just to stick with that, Gail mentioned earlier on that this is for children aged 8 to 18. And I think just in terms of your comment about early intervention, I think we could also improve the report by giving you a breakdown of those 53 and seeing how many were aged 8 to 10, how many were aged 10 to 12, and so on and so forth. I don't know, maybe Gail does, but I suspect that the 53, the balance is towards maybe the upper teenage years, and not to the youngest ones. And it may well be that as a service, we might want to reprofile that in terms of catching them when they're young and intervening more with the 8 to 12s, and you know, rebalance the provision and engagement with families around that early intervention point. But I'll maybe just ask Gail to confirm that what I've said there is correct. The balance of them are going to be at the upper end of the age scale.
Yes, the referrals are predominantly males and predominantly older, and we are looking at the younger age group. And there is new legislation coming in relation to the age of criminal responsibility. So so it's going to be changing from 8 until 12. So we are in discussions with SACRO about and other services about what can we do for young people between 8 and 12 to provide services for negative antisocial behaviours, again, so that doesn't escalate and become involved in offending. But at the moment, the profile is mainly males and mainly teenage, mid-teenage years.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Convener. Gail, can I ask you a question? It says that no fewer than than 50 that we take SACRO take care of. Is there such a thing as a top scale with regards to the funding that we give you, that you can only take so many over that 50? Would that affect the funding that you'd require off of Falkirk Council?
It's difficult to quantify that because each individual intervention is based on the needs and the circumstances of that child. So what I would say is we could work with more children and young people, but if we reduce the service or the staffing, then the quality and depth of intervention would be less. So we could get more numbers, but we might not be providing the best quality of service. So that's why we want to look at the quality as well as the numbers. So 50, over 50, at least 50 is what we're working to at the moment, but we're continually reviewing that and aiming to be providing more services, but still of a high quality.
Yeah, that's fine. What I was meaning there, Gail, is along the lines that if you can only take on so many because the quality would suffer, do you have a kind that we can only take on 100, or we couldn't take on 100 because then we've not got enough staff, we need more funding? That's what I kind of meant.
Yeah, so we've not got an upper limit specifically. We would need to speak to SACRO about that. I mean, what they're saying is they have been up to capacity delivering services to 50 young people within the staffing that they have at the moment.
Thank you, Convener.
Convener, can I get back in? What I would like to see is, we've obviously got people in school, some of whom for various issues can be quite violent and different other things, and necessarily no committed a crime. Others have come to SACRO through the fact that they've committed a crime, and I just feel that the early intervention that we can get, and the more assistance from SACRO and other services would be of great benefit. That's my personal view, and I would like to hear from the other members of the committee. I'm only one member, so I'll shut up now.
If I could just come in, we are looking, the referrals come through a referral group, and it's an early and effective intervention group, and at the moment that's based on offence as the referral ground, but what we are looking is to broaden that out so that any service can make a referral for any child or young person where they're concerned about their behaviours, negative behaviours, antisocial behaviour in the community. So, and what we want to do as well is get increase the number of services that are around the table to talk about referrals, so that SACRO is only one of a range of different services available to children presenting with these types of needs and issues.
Any other questions to Gail? Gail, thanks for that report. Joanne, are you going to do domestic abuse services?
Yes, Convener, thanks very much. So members will know that Committing to Ending Abuse currently deliver services to those affected by fleeing domestic abuse. They offer a three-tier support model that deals with the initial crisis of domestic abuse and recovery from the trauma of abuse. The service is currently inspected under the Scottish Care Inspectorate and receives positive feedback from the inspections that they deliver in their services. It was last inspected in December 2019, and they received scores of 5s, which is very good for support care and quality of staff, and it's cited that they're confident that the staff were informed to deliver effective support to the people within the service. There's no doubt that the service has felt the impact of the recent pandemic, not only for its staff, but also for the needs of the community, who will have felt very much trapped in abusive relationships. As a consequence, the service has experienced not only increasing demands, but more complex cases. This is reflected in the increase of numbers that I've cited in my report. Although the rise in numbers hasn't actually been as significant as in previous years, it's suspected that it's because many of them didn't feel able to approach the service due to the lockdown measures that restricted their movement. So the figures that we're seeing in Q1 of this year start to indicate a rise in the numbers that are approaching the service now that the restrictions have started to ease. Members will know that I've noted concerns in my report in regards to the organisation's financial situation in 1920 of their audited accounts. This seems to be a consequence of a loss of income from another part of their service, from other funding sources, and the organisation were unable to secure funding to maintain those services, and it really just happened right at the point of the pandemic crisis happening. But it did place the organisation and the reserves that they had at risk. As the pandemic had started to develop, the Scottish Government, as well as other funders, had realised the impact that this would have on those affected by domestic abuse. Subsequently, there were significant opportunities to access additional funding, and SIA were successful in gaining grants from the Scottish Government, Business Gateway and Safe Lives, amounting to around £68,500. This has now stabilised the organisation's finances as they continue to investigate how they can fund other parts of their service delivery. Members will know that domestic abuse and gender-based violence is now one of the 6 key themes of the draft Falkirk Plan, which is highlighted as a major public health, equality and human rights issue. The Gender-Based Violence Partnership will be responsible for driving the overall improvement and delivery on this theme, and will monitor and progress the report annually to the community. They will also be responsible for taking forward the review of domestic abuse services that I've noted in my report, and the partnership have already established a working group to focus on and progress the review to ensure that we establish clear and effective pathways for the support of domestic abuse victims within the Falkirk area. Just lastly, the organisation continued to work to keep those affected by domestic abuse in the Falkirk area safe in very difficult circumstances, as everyone has been working in. Members will appreciate that the organisation have met great challenges, and they continue to support their service users above and beyond often what they would be expected to do, and continue to recover as a service coming out of the pandemic.
Okay, Joanna, thank you for that. Any questions to Joanna? Councillor McLuckie.
Yes, Joanna, thank you for the report. It's an excellent report, and we also always need reminded of this. I'm of an age when the treatment of women, particularly, and children, to be honest, was shocking. You know, I'm 66, so well, 67 in a couple of weeks. But the fact is, over my lifetime, I've seen grand progress. But we need reminded that when we see these facts, that abuse is still ongoing and an increase, and it's fundamental. Then, as a council, we do everything we can to look at this, because children that's been in an abusive household, where their parents their mothers getting abused and they get abused, they end up having severe issues themselves later on in life. So it's a good report. I'm clearly impressed with it, and obviously we've got to support this as a body. My concern from dealing with a lot of inquiries is when families break up, and a lot of times women try to keep the family together because there are children involved, and undoubtedly what happens on occasion, we get back to a situation where the lady wants to move the house, but obviously we can't, or it's her house and the child, so where are they going to go? And the father refuses to leave because he's on the tenancy. And so there's still technically, although we know that there's issues, where they shouldn't be living together, but they still seem to be, by the system left, where they're still sharing the properties and probably getting abuse. I do know that if it's proven, we assist them and get them out. But it's worrying at times that is going on, and we haven't get all the basis sometimes why a family's splitting up, because some families still have reservations about making it public, that they've been abused. Thank you.
I don't know if there was a question there or not.
I'm
Anyway,
happy to make
My
a
question is,
small comment.
are we re-looking at the situation where, you know, where families split up and there's been maybe an allegation or a statement made to housing that they're, you know, the family can't live together any longer, and we didn't seem to, if we're identifying that we're doing something about it, what we've got to go is get a system in place where the family, the mother and family must get priority, surely. You know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to say, you know, the children.
Right. So you got an answer for you.
Yeah, sure, no problem, Councillor McCluckie. I mean, obviously, you've highlighted something that puts pressure on the wider local authority as well. And as I sit within the homeless service, we definitely see the pressures that these situations put on our own service. It's very difficult to say personal circumstances, why women do or don't, and why other people do or don't approach services for assistance. A lot of it is to do with fear. A lot of the work we do and that SIA does on our behalf is about risk assessments for individuals, about making sure that they can leave safely, and when they do leave safely, that they have a safe plan in place to do that. And Police Scotland also do that as well when they attend incidents as well. There is new legislation to remove perpetrators from accommodation, and that's something that we're looking at and encouraging as time goes on. It's a fairly new bit of legislation, and obviously in light of the pandemic, a lot of this work hasn't progressed as far along as we hope to. And I suppose lastly, one of the key elements, obviously we've talked about the Falkirk plan, and I talked about that in my update. And you know, delighted to hear that that is a key focus and objective of the Falkirk plan, so that we really start to address the issues regarding domestic abuse in the Falkirk area. We're also looking at it in terms of a housing perspective from our rapid rehousing transition plan, and it's another key focus that we're looking at in terms of addressing the needs of individuals and looking at bespoke services that will be able to address and deal with what you're really discussing today about identifying those in need and then finding key solutions that either allow them to stay within the home if that's safe to do so, or if they need to move, how we do that safely, but also how we reduce the trauma for the whole household in regards to that.
Convener, what I'm trying to relate to is I know a number of cases where a young single mother has moved, you know, every year because the father of that finds out where she is, or she moves for support, or then moving again, and it just seems an ongoing situation. It can't be good for the children involved keeping on going to a new locality, and that's why I'm asking. I'm looking for the interests of the, you know, the family and the people. That's all. Don't know the answers.
That's a quick question, Joanna. Obviously, you said it's been a difficult year because of the COVID situation, and I would have thought prior to COVID, all your contact had been face-to-face with these people are contacting you. What happened during COVID? Did you continue face-to-face, or how did you communicate with them?
Like a lot of support agencies, the agency adapted very, very quickly to be able to provide as much as they could from home. Obviously, where there was situations where they had to go out and it was a dire street scenario where they were out, but in the main, part of the additional funding that they got from Save Lives was to purchase additional IT equipment to be able to deliver as much as they could remotely.
Did that add pressure to your finances then, if you purchase additional IT equipment?
But that they sourced this additional income from Save Lives to be able to do so.
Councillor Murtagh, I believe you want to ask a question.
Thanks, Convener. Obviously, I think it's and I welcome Councillor McCluckie inputting on this. I think it's a very, very difficult area. There's many facets to it, and I think that given it is a renewed focus, it's perhaps something that we could do maybe a briefing on in terms of how the new legislation is working for elected members, so that we understand. But I did want to just comment that although this is an area which predominantly far and away affects women, and that was reflected in the comments of Councillor McCluckie, it does also affect men, and SIA are one of the perhaps a fewer organisations who deal with domestic abuse, who also support men who suffer from domestic abuse as well. And I think that gives them slightly different funding streams with the Scottish Government and how that works out. And I think, but I very much welcome that here in Falkirk, that we have that too, that although it's predominantly a female experience of domestic abuse, and we have so many roads to go and the new legislation being interpreted, we mustn't forget that either, that men can also be subjects of domestic abuse also. But yeah, I would actually like to thank the officers of our council as well for the work that they've done. I know it's been challenging in the monitoring of this year as well, and they mentioned SIA going above and beyond and doing many things. I think I've been out to meet with them, and I think that's absolutely the case, but I know it's been challenging all round, so thanks very much for everybody's work in this really, really difficult time during the pandemic for this subject. It's really, really welcome. Thank you.
I think on behalf of the committee, I'd like to echo these sentiments from Councillor Murtagh. Is there any other questions? Okay, I take you to the recommendations on page 140. And we have requested further information on SACRO. So we can approve the report. Thank you.
Agreed.
Takes up agenda item 7, following the public pound Falkirk Towns Limited. Pete and Jackie, you're still there, or we're waiting you up?
Hi, I'm still here. I'm just trying to switch my camera on. There we are.
Great. Okay, Pete, when they speak to the report.
Thanks very much. I'd like to introduce Jackie MacArthur, who's monitoring officer for Falkirk Towns Limited, and who's known to many of you. The report provides information to Scrutiny Committee on 2 accounting periods, really 1st April 2019 to the 31st of March 2021. We have previously reported on Falkirk Towns, and more recently to this committee on the taxi marshals and safe base, and it was felt that given the role that Falkirk Towns Limited plays in delivering the safe base allocation, that it made sense for the report to be combined, because the two are so closely tied in to the work that Falkirk Towns undertakes. We are obviously aware of the issues that have impacted our town centres in terms of the pandemic, and this has previously been discussed extensively at this committee. And recently we updated earlier this year on how those funds were being, especially the funds with regards to taxi marshalling and safe base projects, were being reallocated to support traders and our communities within our town centres as the pandemic took hold. Paragraph 3.2 really just reminds the committee as to the extent of the reach and the projects delivered by Falkirk Towns, and the additional support that they have recently received through the Council's Economic Recovery Plan to extend that support into Grangemouth, Denny, Bowness and Stenhousemuir. And as well, to note that in this report for the first time that we are also reporting on the additional work that Falkirk Towns do to coordinate and deliver the Council's Safer Streets initiative, primarily, as I've already indicated, taxi marshalling and the safe base projects. We do have a joint working agreement, and there is a board that regularly meets to review and to monitor progress of Falkirk Towns Limited, and the funding again set out in paragraph 4.1 indicates the amalgamation of the budget support that we give to Falkirk Towns in the year 2021, which was the normal yearly contribution we make to Falkirk Towns Limited, the additional economic recovery activities, and the additional funding support to deliver the taxi marshalling Safer Streets safe base. Moving on to the monitoring report, the section A really does highlight the important role that Falkirk Towns Limited and the BID team made to a response to COVID-19, and were dynamic and fleet of foot in making that change to ensure that traders and our communities and our town centre traders and district centres were supported, working closely with key partners on delivery of support. The purpose of funding provided by the council, we do have ambitions for our town centre over the coming years, and Falkirk Towns Limited is a vital element and part that plays. They're a key partner. They're able to draw down additional external funding that the council wouldn't be able to apply for. As an arm's length company, they are able to make applications, and indeed the report does set out where they were successful in securing additional funding to support traders to respond to the recovery, and additional funding that we were able to put out into our town centres, principally through short-term or short notice funding awards announced by the Scottish Government, specifically through Scotland's Towns Partnership, where funding is directed specifically to our town centres and initial initiatives that are able to be delivered. They are able to respond to that quickly, and it really does underscore the important role that they do play. A previous highlight that has been made to Scrutiny Committee is the bid renewal process. At previous reports to this committee, we did indicate that there would be a reballot of the Falkirk bid. Now, the Falkirk bid, just to remind Scrutiny Committee, specifically relates to a geographical area within Falkirk Town Centre alone, and that's where businesses have the opportunity, by looking at a business plan, to vote as to whether or not to have a levy on their non-domestic rates bills, and that levy is ring-fenced to deliver additional promotional activity. And coming out of the pandemic, and as reported to Executive earlier this week, there was an agreement and a positive ballot result where the traders and businesses within Falkirk Town Centre supported a further business plan period from August 21 to October 26, an increased vote of support, recognising the valuable role that the team at Falkirk Towns Limited and the Falkirk Delivers team undertake. And it's an unprecedented fourth term within Scotland, and I think as well just again underscores the additional support that this can bring to traders in town centres, and recognised by traders for the role that they play. I would highlight to members, though, that there do remain risks that will impact the function and role of the Falkirk bid, and that's principally upcoming budget discussions where discretionary fund support, especially through economic development, will again come before members for consideration. This is something that I've highlighted annually in previous reports to Scrutiny. And also the impact on the bid levy, the ability to raise that additional money through non-domestic rates, as we see a large increase in vacancies within the high street and in the bid environment, then that will create income risk for Falkirk Delivers in terms of looking to deliver some of these broader initiatives. The monitoring report does highlight, though, in brief summary, is that the overall risk to the council remains low to medium. There are no concerns with regards to the accounts that have been presented. The accounts that have been recorded at Register's House, Company's House, are up to March 20. And the accounts for the current financial year that we're in, it was agreed by the board that these would be extended pending the result of the ballot. And now that there's a positive position on the ballot, these accounts now will be presented and closed off. The continuing role of taxi marshalling and safe base continues to be carefully monitored and carefully managed. And overall, I think I would just continue to highlight to committee that there are, as is set out in the monitoring report, no overall areas of concern, but we remain aware and closely monitoring external influences such as any decisions that may be made through the budget process. And the council continues at this stage to continue to support Falkirk Towns Limited and the Safe Base project going forward. So just to conclude, the overall risk rating in terms of this organisation, the support it gives to the council, the valued support it gives to our towns and district centres remains low to medium. And again, just highlighting to Scrutiny the report that was presented to Executive earlier this week about the vote of confidence by businesses to the operation of the bid going forward, and especially the role that Falkirk Towns Limited plays in supporting and delivering the outputs of the Council's Falkirk Town Centre Action Plan and economic recovery activity as well. And on that basis, I would recommend Scrutiny Committee note this report and the continued support provided by this organisation in terms of the Council's outputs and corporate goals. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Pete. And obviously it's encouraging to see that you are getting support from the local businesses in the town centre. Well, you don't need a crystal ball, unfortunately, to see that the finances of the council in every area going forward are going to be stretched. It's obviously difficult times ahead. Is there any questions to Pete on the Councillor Grant? I think you're on mute, Councillor Grant.
How's that?
That's it.
Sorry, Convener. Pete, just a quick question about the taxi marshal, and because I was one that asked the question last year. Is it up and running to pre-pandemic state? Is the numbers up, the amount of marshals to pre-pandemic? Are we short? Are we over?
I think critically we remain flexible, but I'll bring Jack in at this point because you'll be able to fully answer your question, Councillor Grant, through you, Convener.
Hello everyone. In response to that, Councillor, we're nowhere near pre-pandemic levels, but month on month people are returning to the town, so we hope that trend will continue. As Pete said, we did redirect the taxi marshalling service to daytime activity to deal with the pandemic when it was at its worst, and town centre businesses and residents needed support. So it's something that we just monitor regularly. We meet regularly, we look at what's coming up, we look at what the tensions are in the town centre, but the taxi marshalling has resumed. They're back on a Friday and a Saturday, and they're being kept very busy, and that does create a level of confidence in the town with the businesses, with the residents, and it seems to be working very well.
Thank you, Jackie. And if it gets busier and busier, do we have the staff to cope with this?
Yeah, we've got the capacity. You know, we've got events coming up, and that's something that we're monitoring very carefully. But we work very closely with the police, with the emergency services, with volunteers, and it's just something that we've just got to be a few steps ahead of in preparation for things that are coming up. But yes, we have no immediate concerns around resources.
Thank you, Convener.
Through you, Convener, I would maybe just through you, Convener, just maybe add that the earlier comments from the report from Police Scotland, that we do liaise closely with Police Scotland, and some of the concerns that are raised around COP26, that is all well embedded into discussions, whether in our town centres, events in our town centres, and also we liaise closely with our resilience officer, and are very much at the heart of any discussions going on around risk therein. So just to give some assurance to committee that there is a joined up approach that takes place here.
Thanks, Pete. Councillor McCluskey.
Aye, Convener, that's an excellent report. Pete's an excellent officer and certainly an excellent report here. Taxi marshalling, understand, was through the day because there were majority of taxis weren't operating either, and it was just through the day they were working because there was no night-time economy, and it's certainly no back to its former levels yet. So we've had that explained. The safe base was another excellent facility. My concern with it is there have been some rumours about what is going to happen with Park Street and you know, in the future. And would we obviously safe base is there's essential work there, and would we relocate that to another facility if Park Street was no longer, you could say, come in?
Would you like me to respond to that?
Right.
Yes, obviously the closure of Park Street is a consideration, and we're looking at a number of other options, including, you know, other vacant units that are in the town. We're also working directly with First Bus and looking at them supporting and providing a vehicle to offer the safe base as well, which, you know, offers unique benefits because we can move around the town as and when it's required. But at the moment, we're still using Park Street, but would report back to Scrutiny should there be any changes in that.
That's fantastic, and I see you've covered all options. Also the person trained in using that naloxone, the overdose reversal, that can save lives, and once again, very important. Like I says, for the money we put into this, it's an excellent facility. I do care about the town centre. I may know, obviously, we may not be high in some businesses' vision at the moment, but we do certainly care for our town centre. If you were on the call earlier, you'd heard me raising the issue, Convener, about the very worrying increase. It seems to me there's an increase in theft in all the businesses, and I was wondering if, and we've asked for a report to come back in the future to police, but I would maybe Pete's the best guy for his contacts in the businesses and the shops, because an awful lot of you know, that's keeping businesses going is getting stolen for certain places, for organised crime groups coming in, drug groups, and even just other people just stealing. But as does, you know, Tesco's, toy stores, all that, they seem to, and I was trying to value as the business is happy with the responses for the police, because they turn up, are we a good of recovering the items and whatever. So maybe it was something you could feed back with using your contacts to members in the future, because I think it would be beneficial for us to know just what's going on out there, because we think we can everything as councillors, but as we find out, we didn't. Get what I mean? So that's my.
Through you, Convener, and I'll let Jackie come in at that point after me. We do work closely and liaise closely with the police, especially around some of the issues that can arise from time to time within the town centre, and Jackie articulate a wee bit more on that. We also run Retail Radio Link, and also the current changes that members will be aware with regard to the council's CCTV. CCTV plays an extensive role in offering a secure environment and fighting crime within our town centres, and I know that the CCTV matter is considered separately in other committee meetings and budget meetings, but it is important that the role of CCT plays within our town centres, and we have invested, and it is rolled out into our district centres as well. But Jackie, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would just like to add, because it can't be covered, the level of support that this organisation provides to the town centre, because there's a lot of work that they do that goes unnoticed. But I would like to tell you about current things that we're doing in the town centre, working with the businesses. So antisocial behaviour, drug use, theft, are all very high, and I would say that they have definitely spiked during COVID and post-COVID. So we're having to respond directly to that. So we're working very closely with businesses. We're able to react very quickly. If a business, quite often businesses are, you know, one-person businesses, so someone can feel quite vulnerable if they're in the shop and someone comes in and can be threatening or steals things. So we can provide that direct interaction through the radio link, and the street ambassador and support staff can be there immediately to support people. But on a different note as well, antisocial behaviour, we have a lot of vulnerable people who are living and spending time in the town centre, and they too have to be supported. Last week when I was in Falkirk, there was a young mother who was there with her child, and she was clearly intoxicated, and she had a very, very young child in that buggy going around the town centre. So we were able to intervene, get her into a safe place, support her and her child, and get the right support for her through her family and through social services. And that's something that's happening very much on a daily basis in the town. So this organisation, with that high street presence, they're able to deal with that immediately and work very closely with emergency services and support services to sort that. ASDA have been reporting for many years problems with antisocial behaviour, people taking drugs and begging outside the shop, and they were saying that they can demonstrate now that through our intervention that things have really improved. So we're working with the police. We have got exclusion orders in place so that those culprits who are creating a nuisance for shoppers and for shops through shop lifting, we've now got them excluded from the town centre. So you can imagine that has a real positive impact on businesses, and it improves confidence in the people who are using our town centre. So there's lots of initiatives and lots of work going on that quite often isn't reported, but is providing a real valuable source of support to all our town centre users.
Well, Convener, although I said it was an excellent report, I wish a bit of that had been in it, because, as I say, thankfully you've raised us the kind of valiant work that you do and protecting people, and I think all members would thank you for that. The one thing you mentioned was ASDA, and I had a number of concerns came to me with the fact we have got two people going about sweeping up in the town centre, and ASDA's a particular area for them congregating, as you say, but for a while there we didn't even hear a litter bin outside ASDA. I don't know what the reason was, but the guy was just constantly sweeping up there, and it just didn't seem, you know, why should that happen? If there were litter bins, I don't know if they've been put in there now, maybe peekends, but folk wouldn't have just threw it in the ground, you know what I mean? But I felt sorry for the guy, hearing the folks' comments, or the public felt sorry for the guy, never ending just going round with his brush, you know. But thank you.
Litter bin or no litter bin, it's an offensive drop litter. Councillor Balfour.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I was just looking for a wee bit information on the events. I was going to ask if you were having any events, but I don't know if you can divulge any sort of information on that yet. The other thing was the public Wi-Fi, if you can give me a wee bit more detail on that. There was talk before, a while ago, about maybe having a landing page or something that would they could get into, and then it would maybe advertise businesses and things like that. If we can maybe have a wee update on that.
Through you, Convener, and then I'll bring Jackie in if that's okay. Jackie will comment on events, but an example of an event that is coming up is with regard to COP26 and how we can work with Falkirk Delivers to deliver an event that engages traders and users of our town centre to COP26. Public Wi-Fi is funded separately through the Town Centre Capital Fund, and is a specific project along with a suite of investment projects in the town centre that is being delivered by the council. But again, we work closely with Falkirk Delivers, who will help us then roll out the end page, as you say, Councillor Balfour, and that's been a significant investment that has been made across all our district centres, and has been slightly elongated in its rollout because of COVID. But Jackie can give us an update, a further update. Thanks, Jackie.
Okay, happy to do that. Yes, the council has invested significantly in public Wi-Fi in Falkirk in our 4 district town centres. Stenhousemuir is just about to go live in the next week or so, and we have provided this additional funding to Falkirk Delivers to support us in populating these websites, because there's no point if the council investing in all this fantastic infrastructure if we're not utilising it. So working with them very closely. If you go into Falkirk Town Centre now, you will automatically get a message that will say, hello, welcome to Falkirk Council's free Wi-Fi service managed by Falkirk Delivers. And it'll immediately, once you log in, it'll immediately take you to a whole host of information on what's happening around the town centre. So that's our aspiration for our other district towns as well. And I'm working with the team to make sure that these are all up and running over the next couple of weeks. So councillors will see that. And obviously that is a tool for businesses to interact better with their customers and improve the visitor experience of those who are venturing into our town centres. We want to use this digital platform as a way for businesses to engage better with their customers and just utilise online trading as a new way of trading. Many of our businesses are traditional and they tend to rely on people just coming through their door and putting money in their tills, and we've got to make them think differently about how they can improve the resilience of their business. And one thing I really just want to touch on really quickly is the gift card that has recently, that we introduced last year. Now you'll know that the Scottish Government has recently funded Scotland's Towns Partnership to roll out the local Scotland Loves Local gift card. But I'm pleased to say and proud to say that we were one of the early adopters and we did it last year. So we really think that this initiative aligns with the recovery effort because it supports community wealth building, it locks in local spend, and that translates to local jobs. We need to be building that into our procurement frameworks. There's lots of opportunities that we have to extend that. But this, you'll all be aware of the 20-minute neighbourhood concept as well. So we're using that gift card to promote that and connecting local people to their town centres, because we want to lever that work that we've already done, and we want to promote that access to 20-minute neighbourhoods with a focus on sustainable travel, fresh fruit, food, fitness, leisure, and this is all work that's underway as well. So the gift card is a super way of locking in local spend and really acting like a local currency. So it's something that we're really keen to promote. In terms of events, we're going to be very soon, we'll be releasing the Christmas campaign for Falkirk and the districts. We are looking now, rather than having one big switch on event in Falkirk, which, as you know, sometimes attracted up to 17,000 people in the town centre, we're trying to avoid that under the current situation. So we're doing a much more prolonged campaign that will be over 4 or 5 weeks. So there'll be lots of different interventions that will be happening just to support business resilience, get people into our town centres, get them connecting, get them thinking local, and getting their town centres in their hearts and minds again. We're seeing that very much, that people are tending to stay local, but we're just trying to think out the box what we can actually do. Obviously, we're doing a response to COP26 and we're working with other local authorities. We've got an event coming up called CHOP26, and that's when we're going to see the 10-metre climate change puppet storm coming to Falkirk. So lots of work happening behind the scenes just to make sure that we get the right partners involved and that we keep people safe in Falkirk, but at the same time driving Falkirk Town Centre's recovery, economic recovery. Many of the businesses really need the support at this time. So we're working with a number of partners to put on a really nice, safe event that will hopefully get our shop keepers' tills ringing in the run up to Christmas, securing local jobs, etc. So lots happening, and we're, as I say, we'll be releasing that once we've finalised all the Christmas plans. we'll be releasing that to members.
Okay. Just further on the gift card, I seem to remember before there was some restrictions on to the areas it covered. Is there any plans to extend that out a wee bit to sort of streets surrounding the town centre?
Yes, there's plans. We want to see this gift card being used everywhere in Falkirk. We had limitations on the reach of it because we only had a certain amount of funding to actually deliver that. So we had to focus in Falkirk and our district town centres, and it was a super tool in helping businesses to trade through the pandemic. You know, a time when most of our businesses had to close, this gave them a unique way of actually trading, and also gave local people a way to support shops. And instead of just going directly to Amazon to buy things, they started to think, where can we spend locally? And that gift card was a way to help that to happen. But yet we want to extend it over Falkirk. It's a unique tool. You're going to see a campaign and a Sky TV campaign over the next couple of months that we're featuring in quite heavily, and we want to just get this gift cards in everybody's minds, and we want more businesses to sign up to using it. The uptake has been incredible, but clearly we've got a lot of businesses in the Falkirk area, so we've got a lot of work to do to just extend that reach.
Okay, thanks for that, Jackie. Thanks, Pete.
Any other questions? Councillor Coleman.
Thank you. I'm curious if the current level of available taxis meets the demand for those taxis for the daytime or nighttime economy.
Just to say, that was a question I was going to ask as well, because I believe there's a lot of pressure put on the taxi marshals in the evening because there's not enough taxis.
Yep, that's the problem that we're finding at the moment. Many taxi drivers, they just disappeared, and many of them have not come back. So we're trying to raise that issue through the local taxi forum just to get more taxis on the ground. I mean, it's not an acute problem, but it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. And we're doing what we can to try and tip the balance so that we have plenty available.
Through you, convener, I could maybe suggest as well that we could maybe do a comparison on taxi numbers pre-COVID to where we are now, that shows the number of self-employed or taxi driver businesses that are no longer operating as taxis. We supported taxi drivers through the specific funding that came from Scottish Government to them. And we have readily got some stats I'm sure we'll be able to pull together, just do a quick comparison to show where numbers are at the moment.
Where the taxi driver numbers have gone down, but private hire numbers have gone up because they didn't have to sit on the knowledge test. It's something we'll check out if you like.
Can I just add a point, convener, that might be of interest to the group as well? I won't take out too much time, but we've recently introduced footfall sensors in the town centre as well. So in previous reports that have come through this committee, we were relying on anecdotal data about, you know, how many people were using the town centre in the evening. So now we have robust evidence that can prove how many people are in the town at any particular time. So we hope to be using that data going forward in terms of showing the benefits of interventions in the town centre.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Councillor McCluskey.
I just let me back in here. A good point you're making about the taxis. I believe a number of them during the last year have, obviously a lot of restaurants and that was closed, you couldn't go and different other things, but a lot of the taxi drivers are now working doing deliveries and finding you know, they can make more there than, as the town centres not as vibrant as it used to be. They used to rely on, you know, the clubs and pubs coming out late and that, and so they're still doing these other things. I think that's the point. And lastly, on it's mentioned in the report, the free after free. I was wondering about the update, if I could get a bit of an update on that, the effectiveness of it, because I mean, a lot of people go doing it 3 o'clock because you need to pay your park, but you find it's full in 10 minutes. But then when you go down to the high street, there's nobody there. So is it customers that are going in, or is it people coming back for their work, or whatever? Whoever evaluated that everybody's using the high street, I mean, for shops, and how effective the free after fees been. I was just trying to see if I can get a bit in that, please.
Through your convener, I'll bring Jackie in, but again, I would prefix any comment by saying that we have invested in our car parks to give broader automation and price flexibility on the ticketing and the charging, because patterns that may have been pre-COVID, we may not be parking patterns that we have now. And we have specifically invested in that again as an output through the Town Centre Regeneration Fund, as part of the host of projects we're investing in our town centres. But Jackie, maybe you can comment specifically on the point raised, please.
Yeah, as part of the Town Centre Capital Fund, we did do a whole parking survey review. And as a result of that review, we decided to keep, we recommended that the council keep the free after 3, but we also introduced a 50p parking charge for half an hour, because we know that people are coming into the town centre for shorter periods of time. They park and they just go in and get what they need to get. We knew that was going to happen through the click and collect culture. But free after 3 is still being well used, usually by mums picking the kids up from school, and then they pop into the town to pick up a few things. And the businesses really rely on that, and they regularly report that, you know, it's a bit of a godsend for them, because they do see a wee peak in trade after 3 o'clock. So it's something that's welcome, and it's been still very well used.
Thank you. Any other questions? We take to the recommendations in page 156. Approve the report. Agreed.
Agreed.
Councillor Murtagh, do you want in?
It was just really because there have been some questions about the taxi, marshalling, and Jackie had mentioned going to be engaging with the taxi forum, and there are some, it's a complicated landscape, as I think we all know, and many of the things we hear about HGV drivers and all the rest of it, you know, there's been many complicated factors over the pandemic, but it was just that I will be engaging with Jackie and with Pete directly as well. I've asked licensing officers this week to do some investigation into to work around taxi numbers. It's a very difficult thing because as we know, we could license the whole authority, but we can't compel people to go out and work at any specific times, and so it's very complicated to try to work out where the peaks and the availability and demand is. But I've asked for some additional survey work beyond what the department can tell from its own figures on that, because as I think you'll probably see from press reports and media reports, up and down the country there are these kind of issues. So it's just to update the committee that though it's a complicated issue, but one that officers are looking at presently, and we'll be engaging with the bid on that and through the taxi forum too.
Thank you. Just withdraws the meeting to a close. Before we finish, just a bit of information for the committee. Just to let you know from an earlier, when we talked about the Falkirk Trust, Councillor Coleman is no longer a director on the trust. It's just for information, no debate on it. It's just information, Councillor Coleman. However, I am a new director on the trust, and I should have declared an interest earlier, but still going to take part. I still felt I should take part in the debate or the agenda item. So can I thank you all for your attendance?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for clarifying that. And I'll apologise to Councillor Coleman when we meet, as I say, as well as online. And I congratulate you, Chair. In fact, any chair with me being on the committee has got a hard job, so I congratulate you all. So thank you.
With a lot of practice, John. A lot of practice,
Oh, no.
Thank you for your attendance. Have a good day.
Thank you, Convener. Good luck to you, Sophie.
Bye. Yeah. All right.